Okay. Yep. It looks like we're live, folks. Yeah, this is great. Okay, so for you folks who've been anxiously waiting this interview as much as I have, and I've seen there's a few of you, so that's pretty awesome. And like I say, I'm really, really looking forward to having this conversation with Kris. Both of us have been following each other for quite a while, obviously share a lot of things in common. But the first thing I really want to get to know about Kris, that's the thing, because it's easy to know people in terms of the things that they're against. But I just want to ask Kris, and I'm sure some of you people, although I'm sure many of you people who'll be watching are fans or followers, anyways. I just want to ask Kris, kind of a little bit of a background history and kind of what got him into like even being active on social media and pushing back against big government initiatives and stuff. So if you wouldn't mind answering that question for me and the audience there, Kris, that'd be great, buddy.
Perfect. Thanks for having me on, man. I really do appreciate this. I'll keep it quick. I think that I've got a lot of experience in advocacy. In my 20s and 30s, I spent a lot of time on the ground. Just standing, I guess you could say standing up for the little guy, but it was really one of those situations where I graduated from university with my diploma in social services. And it was right when the DEI, gender ideology stuff was coming. And, I was a mature student. I started asking questions and I kind of just really didn't align. So I just put a whole bunch of resources in my backpack and started heading into Tim Hortons and sitting down and just talking with local community members. And I ended up developing relationships with a lot of First Nations communities, people that are just, a lot of homeless people have just had one bad break happen in their life. But I started to notice the systems were they were not really representing the people. I started noticing just little things here and there about nepotism and just where's the taxpayer money going, right? So I started asking questions, and I was one of those guys where I would go in, if you had a problem, I would go in and talk to the MLAs, talk to the MPs, try and get to the bottom of things. And they started to realize that I wasn't going anywhere. And it was very hard to trigger me as well too. So I'm a very happy guy. Like I hope I help as many hurt as few while I'm here has been my motto for a couple of decades now. And so over time, people started to notice, and I started getting into more of the heavier things where certain things were politicians, because I've only been affiliated a couple times with political parties, but I'm not good with conforming to groupthink.
Yeah.
Like if I've got an opinion that disagrees with the party platform, I can't negotiate that, right? Like, so it's like I kind of stay in the middle for the most part and try and inform people. I don't care. I've always had that thing. I'm a charter guy. There's loopholes there, as we learned over the last 4 years. There's loopholes, but I've always been, you come to this country, regardless of your faith, if that's what drives you, you have a right. Regardless of your political affiliation, that's what drives you. Okay, but I take issue. It came down to it. I ended up working for the Speaker of the House. I took on a bunch of different contracts, and I had worked on trying to fix problems like youth that age out of care that end up in a lot of situations homeless, and they don't have a place to go. So those are some of the issues I took on, but I ended up getting into the deeper meat things, as far as being the guy that you can call and I'll go meet somebody at a coffee shop. They'll slide a piece of paper over. I'll take a look at the name. I'll get back to you in a couple of days and let you know if I'm willing to take it on. And it always had two variables that would for consideration for me. It was how many people are being harmed. Like what is the policy as far as the mandate versus the actual what's happening on the ground, and then is it abuse of taxpayer money? Because that really, for me, it's one of those things where we see so much. We can get into that a little later if you want, as far as the what we see happening with the taxpayer money. But what I found is that I got described, like when I retired just before I went to work for the BC legislature. The speaker, he was an independent, Daryl Pluckus. I went to work for him for a year, and then I took one more contract after that. That I started to feel I was getting to the point where I'm in meetings where I don't belong. A lot of people describe politics as like WWE, right? And it is. It's like what you see behind the scenes is it's all, they create these narratives, and in the end, it's all about making sure they can land that cushy job in the private sector after they're done. Make sure they get their pension. I can't tell you how many times people said, just keep going, keep doing what you're doing, check pension. And I'm like, yeah, but my soul's on the table, my integrity, ethics, none of this stuff matters. It's all about just being able to retire and letting everybody else fall behind. And I've always had that motto of not leaving anyone behind. I look people in the eyes. I don't look up. I don't look down on people. I'm just kind of like, where are you at? And then right before the pandemic, I'm 40. I was almost 40, and I'd been single for almost 2 decades, because as a part of the job, it's kind of like, I was very focused on it. I didn't want to give the other side anything I was a pain in the ass, man. Like literally, I think people from the MLAs and MPs, they only worked with me because they knew that I was going to be collecting metadata, that I was doing the FOIs, I was asking the hard questions, I was creating records. There was a few years there where on Boxing Day, I would email every politician in the province to remind them of certain suffering that's happening in a community, or certain people that aren't being held accountable. And oftentimes they'd respond by giving them like the order of BC, right? It's like they know that I'm coming and they want to just try and insulate them. And it wasn't just me. Like any contracts I took on, I want to be clear, it wasn't about me. It was about empowering other people in a community to know, hey, I was just more of a messenger, right? I had the articulation, I had the look, I had the diligence and the ability to get in people's faces and say, you're going to pick on me while they heal. And once they heal, they're coming over that hill. You realize that, right? And so you can kind of, but it gets to the point where no one ever gets held accountable. No one goes to prison. So I was one of those guys, you see, oh, I'm retiring. This politician's retiring for personal reasons. And it's like, I'm sitting at the bar with a couple friends and like, exactly. Do they get held accountable? No. Oftentimes they leave, they go into the private sector, or they start a new company and the government gives them more money. So it's like this cyclical thing, because they know too much, right? You play the game, you're compromised, right? And I was one of those guys that would never play the game. I would be helpful in that, but I always worked alone. I hated the term fixer, right? And when I did retired, and it's like, I don't even know how to describe myself. I've been doing this for 15 years, a very high success rate. I never missed. But at the same time, I don't like being viewed as a mercenary, like, because it was never about the highest bidder. It was always about, okay, what is the impact that's happening to the people on the ground? How much taxpayer abuse is occurring? What laws have been broken, whether it's misappropriation, fraud on the public. There's so many different things that most people are just uninformed with. And I can remember, this is one of the things that really bothered me when I was walking around Mission, BC, and I had copies of like welfare rights, Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right, to hand out. So many people didn't even know the document existed, right? And so it was insane. And so when I retired, when the pandemic hit, it's like, I had no skill. Like I had no tools. Like when people would phone me, I had like 2,000 contacts on my phone, and I was getting hundreds of calls each week as far as, hey, I need your help. I need your help. And I'm like, I need you to go to the BC Human Rights website right now. Go and look. We are not accepting complaints right now. So it was like this. I talked to my family. I'm like, okay, we got to make a choice. I can't stay here. People are coming by my house all the time looking for help. I was like somebody that people could trust, but I had no tools anymore. They took them all from me. And so I moved. And I spent the last couple of years, and you asked me, well, why, how did I end up on social media? I was one of those guys that was not. I was totally against it. I loved that people were, because when you're tracking nepotism, please post your family gathering so I can see all the different last names, and I can put these, I'm a whiteboard guy, right? Like literally that's what I used to do, just pattern recognition and remove corruption. So I worked for the government for only a year. The rest of the time I was with the private sector or the or not-for-profit sector, just helping people clean out their boards most of the time, right? The mandate's subverted. They don't have somebody, they need somebody from the outside to come in and take a look at things. And I was so friendly, people thought I was naive, and in the end I walk in wearing my suit, and it's like, this is what they're doing right in front of everybody. And then I'd move on to the next one. But when the pandemic hit, it was like my world was inverted, much like I'm sure yours was. I joined the BC Libertarian Party briefly, just because I got to the point where I'm sitting there. It took me about a full year, because I used to be a lead hand for infection control at a hospital. And so when the masking thing started, I'm just kind of like, okay, this is not science. This makes no sense to me. Or we're not even telling you. I see people out there wearing dirty masks, and I could see the looks in their eyes, right? I literally felt like I woke up on a different planet. And right before I left, I had a lot of connections with like the local pastors in communities, and the real advocates on the ground every day for the marginalized communities. So every time there was like a homeless camp that would be displaced, I would be the guy there in the suit, to navigate between the police and everybody, just to try and get people water, make sure everything was going well. But I remember going and talking to a couple of them, and I'm just like, so where are we at? And they had made the decision. They took government money, so they were now promoting this experimental treatment. And I can remember looking in their eyes, like, what have you done? It's like these people are relying on you to look out for their best interests, and now because you've taken funding from the government, you don't have a choice. Like, are you being threatened? Like, they'll cut it off, and they knew they would lose their funding. And so I knew that everything was done. So I looked around. I said to my mom that, hey, I don't want healthcare facilities telling me I can't see you, right? I'm an Aries. I'm a strong. I don't want to end up in prison, right? So I'm willing to move. Like as your parents get older, it's like I'm I'm willing. So, I said, let's move together. Let's go find a quiet place, I'm out in the Okanagan, beautiful views, because I knew there was healing that needed to occur.
Yeah.
Right. And so I dropped everything. And then I got on when the We Charity scandal thing started.
Right. Yes.
I got on social media and I just started, what are you guys doing? And so I'm pointing out all the laws and doing my thing. And that's where I think people started to, because I have like a background as far as being able to articulate positions. I like to look at everything and not jump to conclusions. I like to ask questions. I like to get people to think for themselves. I don't want you to, just because I say it, you believe me. It's like, take what I have as one pillar of what you need to be able to form your own opinion. And we just don't see enough discernment now. And so we got lit up to the convoy, and my account got shut down. So I was in no man's land for a while there. And then when Elon...
Oh, so you're one of the guys, they did shut the accounts down.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Wow. My account went down the same day as Andy Lee's and a few others, like 2 days before the Emergencies Act came down. Wow. And because I was active, like I was honestly not healthy, man. It's like I'm on there and I'm like scrolling and I'm just absorbing all of this. And like I'm taking arrows all day. I view it like Boromir from Lord of the Rings, right? That you just keep catching them. But there's like that steadfastness, right? You got to get up. You got to keep going. There's something's happening here. And the part that bothered me the most is the amount of trauma that's been inflicted on the people. And they're still, to this day, they're not even acknowledging it. So coming from a social work background, I'm looking at the kids, I'm looking at the seniors, I'm looking at the indigenous, the faith-based communities. I'm seeing, wow, this looks like a very coordinated attack against everybody. And so so then I came to the conclusion, it's like, all right, this is a marathon. If we don't keep our wits, if we don't focus on, trying to understand what's happening, at the same time can't be consumed. You can't stare into the abyss forever, because you won't recognize yourself or anything around you after. Right. And so I came back with, I took a little bit of this year off just to heal. And I come back and Musk has been good. Again, I don't trust anybody. Honestly, like I look now, it's like I know there's white hats, because I was one of them, and a lot of the people that I used to work with, some of them decided I couldn't, because I was already kind of out of the game. I was trying to retire. I needed to focus on myself. I put 15 years in of dedicated 12 to 16-hour days. I was tired, man. But some of them, they took the backs to go back into this. They knew that they if they said no, they were going to be shut out. And so there's people out there that do have that level. And it wasn't like I wouldn't have had the connectivity that some of these people did. But I know there's white hats out there. We know there's black hats. We see them a lot. And you can even describe black hats as some of the paid shills for the parties, that they're just, to me, you're not helping anybody by carrying water when we're facing what we're facing. Exactly. What kind of keeps me going. I look at Musk and a lot of people right now as gray. I don't know if they're white hats. I don't know if they're black hats. I do know that some of the things I agree. I see, okay, this is interesting to me. Other things I completely disagree with, as far as this is very, I don't like to jump to this is a malicious act, but I always try and take a step back onto the gravity of how many people are you affecting with your decisions, right? And so whether it's business, whether it's for the globalist agenda, I don't know. But I mark it. I make a note. So that's what led me here.
Well, that's quite a story and quite a little adventure of your own. My whole thing. So just the reason why I asked predominantly is, so this was actually after, maybe you weren't familiar. I found myself in a strange situation. There was a few of us here in Canada, and I reached out, and I've actually made contact with them over the years, a lot of them. But it seemed to be, and I guess you'd have to be predisposed to caring more or a lot about even American culture and their politics and stuff too. But it was the whole Ron Paul. Were you around during the whole Ron Paul thing? Yeah.
He was the one that woke me up.
Okay.
Right?
So yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, I should say, most of my stuff was micro level with what I was doing on the ground. It was very specific. And then, so when I think it was 2006, 2007, I started paying attention to more of the libertarian views. Like, I don't agree with, I don't like labels. Am I a conservative? Well, what does that mean? Like, before the pandemic, I would have said, okay, I'm a classical liberal. Well, what does that mean? Yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah, so that's what I would have considered myself as a kid, for sure. Right. Yeah.
Right. But again, it's like the labels are difficult. But when I started listening to Ron Paul and Audit the Fed and some of these movements leading up to the Occupy Wall Street and all these other kind of things, he gave me a much more of a macro level in regards to just the different way of thinking in regards to
Yeah.
libertarian, right? Because libertarian
Right.
growing up, it's no different when we're programmed, we're conditioned growing up as far as what we should like, what we should pay attention to. Like even now with PPC and other things, like everyone's kind of like, focus
Yeah.
on just these two conservative liberals. That's all that we should be
Right.
looking at.
Right.
So when I started looking at the libertarian side of things, and like that's kind of why, like I was involved briefly with the BC Libertarian Party out here, but again,
Right.
it's very difficult for me to be in a circumstance where I'm being told what to think and what to do. I need to have
Yeah.
more freedom in regards to having at least discussions, even if they're behind closed doors. I don't like
Right.
having things shut down if I got an important question about systems and structures.
Right.
But Ron Paul was one of those guys that I can listen. I retweet him. Like I'm like, oh yeah, because I lose people, and if you change your profile picture,
Oh, yeah.
I might lose you in the fog, right? Because I
Right.
try to be as good as I can to stay up. I've got people I retweet every day. I like to
Yeah,
mix it up and
for
share
sure.
smaller accounts, but I lose
I'm very
people,
familiar
right?
with
Because
that.
I'm in that zone.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with that because I've actually kind of lost contact, and every once in a while I'll be like, "Oh yeah, we used to communicate quite a bit," but it might be just something like you suggested. Maybe their account got taken down, and then it was difficult to find each other again. So I know what you mean. But the
Yeah.
reason why I brought up the Ron Paul thing, just so you know where I'm going with this, because my whole thing and what I've been really piquing my interest in recent times, in particular, is once again paying attention to, because as far as I'm concerned, the Americans were the ones that did the greatest experiment in human history in terms of let's see how this individual liberty thing actually turns out, and trying to lay down the baseline, at least the philosophical baseline at the time, or based on the understanding at the time of what it would be. How do you create this thing called a free society, right, from scratch, more or less? And what I've paid attention is, as Canadians, we do have, I guess, somewhat of our own distinct culture, but there's definitely enough similarities, even though a lot of Canadians like to, a lot of them like to pat themselves on the back for their loathing of their American counterparts. But there's enough shared history and heritage and stuff like that, and geography
Way
and
more in
culture.
common than what is
Right.
different. Yeah.
And
For
culture. I mean,
me.
think about it. Every one of us in Canada grew up watching American movies and television shows and all. So, I mean, to pretend otherwise is just foolish. But my big thing, what I've noticed is, it wasn't even that for Ron Paul. Well, the one thing I remember, because I come from a religious background, and then of course statism introduced in my life much more later in life with a lot of family members who work for the state. But both of them, whether I was being raised in the religious kind of settings or in the state environment, what I kept getting from, whether you're talking about Protestants, Catholics, Wesleyans, Presbyterians, all the people that the different denominations of faith that I grew up around, or NDP, liberal, conservative, all of these people, right? One come from religion, one come from a different kind of religion, but let's just call it the state. Right? But
Right.
the thing that drove me nuts growing up, and I'm like you, it's not that I'm not like, I'm not even, let's say, an ultra math kind of guy, but things have to, I'm one of those people that it has to fucking make sense to me. If it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't run through the old cranium where it's like, okay, that makes sense, then I reject it outright, and it really irks me. And the one thing that Ron Paul did, and the philosophy of liberty in particular, now every human being is fallible, so you're not going to deliver the message perfectly. I can't even do it, right? But what it was everything that he had to say, for the most part, I shouldn't say everything, but most of the things he had to say, he had logic, philosophical concepts, principles, all these things that backed it up. And it was like, fuck, I couldn't poke anything. I couldn't poke holes through his messages. And to me, that's what resonated most with me. And the fact that, and to me, this is what why I'm kind of bringing this up in terms of the context today, is it wasn't even that Ron Paul, I don't know if you're familiar, but he ran in I think it was 88. Yeah, I believe it was 88. He ran under the Libertarian Party for president in the United States, way back when he was much younger than in the 2008-2012. Had basically no success, because the way, no matter what country you live in, let's just admit it, it's pretty difficult. Not saying it's impossible, but it's pretty difficult to bring a party out of nowhere, more or less, and make it in any immediate time frame that's going to work for you to become the new movement, to get rid of the status quo or the establishment. But what I recognize that Ron Paul is like, okay, I'll just use the bully pulpit, because what it is he recognizes he had the message, right? All he really needed was the pulpit to deliver the message. He even admitted early on in some of his interviews, although he had to kind of tweak that, but he wasn't necessarily even concerned with whether he was going to win, the race. It was, can he get Canadian or the American mindset in the right place? That's really key for me. If you want to shift your culture, is they have to have the right mindset,
Yeah.
and that was
And
the
it
key
takes some
factor.
prep.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that was the key factor for me. And now that's what I'm seeing today. And now, even with the Trump, once again, I was just as apprehensive as a libertarian with supporting Trump early on too, because like, oh, come on, man. Like, this guy is obviously not a libertarian. But once again, my pragmatic brain and just even trying to think about these things critically, I realized that once again, but he too is the guy now modern, 12 years later after Ron Paul's run, or actually, I guess 2016. So it would have only been 4 years later back then. But here's a guy now that has access to the same bully pulpit. And in 2024, this run up, when I seen prominent libertarians taking advantage of that, I think quite wisely and astutely, and saying, hey, listen, let's run with this, right? We're not there. Like, let's just admit, it's not like you're going to blame libertarians if well, some people might try, but if Trump does, people don't agree with. The most important thing is, though, that they rallied around at least the idea of trying to bring more liberty to the front center. Now, there's going to be some argument going forward, but to me, I think that was a key to success. And in Canada, I think you may have been, or you may still be. Are you a PPC supporter, or were you a PPC supporter?
That's a good thing to clarify, because it's like what I found is like I have a lot of like my account. I don't want an echo chamber, right? So there's a lot of libertarians, PPC, CPC, and on one side, CPC doesn't want me calling out their leader. PPC wants me to just be supporting their leader. And what I've done is, like I've said, right. I am not like I'm the same thing with what you do with your body. Like, however you want to vote, I'm not telling you how to vote, right? But at the same time, I vote on principle. Right. And so whatever people want to glean from that, okay. But am I supportive? Like, would I like to shake Maxime Bernier's hand for what he did? Like, he was the only politician in Canada that was standing up for us. And that's what I don't like, is when I see the Conservatives now trying to reframe and rewrite history in regards to the ones that do that. Either they know full well they're lying, or they didn't live it. As somebody, as one of the people that said, I did not participate, right? I didn't tell people what to do with their body either way, because I don't want people telling me what to do with mine.
Sure,
but I sure as hell do not forget what it was like looking at all the Conservatives. Where are you? We are being segregated. We are being attacked. We are being demonized publicly, and you are saying nothing. And so when I take issue with that, but I did say, I do say that I'm very supportive. Like, I'm anti-globalist. Yes, I do not like people that are. So when I see the Conservatives picking up this Canada First approach, you're lying. You're lying. And so I got to call that out, right? You're not, right? You're Harper signed us up to 2030, all these other things. It's like, I tried it, but I'm not trying to piss off the Conservatives. My approach on this is that we know the Conservatives are going to win the next election. What I'm trying to do leading up to that is, like, the work's not done. Right. I don't want, let's party for a couple of weeks hard when Trudeau's gone. Let's party. But we got to get back on the horse. Right. Let's have our feast. Let's have our, we can start the healing. That's what I'm looking forwad to, is even the people who are, because there's so many, I don't like to say conservatives, right? Because there's so many different kinds of conservatives, different reasons why people are supporting or defending Poilievre and them. My concern is that we need people we need Max in Parliament. We need libertarians in Parliament. We need the independents, so we can break that bubble that is so easily. That's why I say it took me a little bit. Like, I always, there's a lot of evidence to suggest there's a uniparty based on what the Conservatives don't talk about. Controlled opposition is, you need silence from them. Don't go there. We'll let you go here. And I had been in a lot of situations like that before, where I'm listening to these political strategists, and they're going around about how to navigate these narratives to get the public focused on something else quickly. Right. So it's a lot of it's this generation. So when I start to see, now I'm being asked to, let's just wait until he gets in. And I'm like, well, the shots are still going on. People are still being harmed. You stole how many generations of youth have you stolen in regards to early childhood development, or from all of the impacts of these policies. So what I'm saying to people is, we need to get rid of the globalists. At the same time, we cannot go into this election thinking that this is going to solve the problem. I have no evidence.
Well, here,
let me just going to be any different, right?
Yeah, well, here's what, just to clarify, so you know where I'm kind of going with this, because my thing now, and I'm having this conversation with you today. I'm going to be talking with the guy Jason Levine. He runs the Jason Levine Show, and he's connected with a lot of the fellas that I used to associate with too during my run up for PBC. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but when Maxime, I watched the whole thing with the 49.5, 50.5, and Andrew Scheer getting over that threshold with the, here's supply management, here dairy cartel, here, you know what I mean? So I was right with Maxime Bernier, and I jumped in full-throatedly and thought, you know what, as much as I wasn't really a fan of the name People's Party of Canada, but I was like, oh, you know what, who cares, whatever. At least it's a party, an upstart, and it's going to be led by a guy who, to me, it seemed like it was at least libertarian leaning, kind of a conservative. He seemed to have a history or a track record of being fairly consistent with his messaging. And I was, like I say, jumped in full-throated, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, but if you go through my past YouTube channel, or even it's uploaded all on Rumble now too as well, but I mean, I spent a long time, I don't know, a year and a half or so, I don't know, quite a while, but I interviewed like probably dozens of candidates. I talked to like, I don't know how many supporters and members. I became a founding member myself of the BBC. I tried everything. I tried everything I could, like, especially on the online sphere, but even out in my physical space too, in the physical world, of promoting the PBC. And I, to this day, there's quite a few of them that I've still have contact with, but there's a lot of them. And at the time, like, my channel took off like crazy. I had, sometimes tens of thousands of views on my videos during that time. And it became like, it was becoming a very popular movement. But then after Maxime, didn't win and all this stuff, me being my typical self, I'm not going to placate people and soothe you with niceties. I'm going to point out the things that I observe. Don't get pissed off at me. Let's just talk about it, right? But basically, it's almost like it's like, how did everyone, what was it? How was it so coordinated? But I went from basically, like I say, into obscurity in terms of my views after that, for having a bit of a following out with the BBC crowd. And I guess where I'm at today is I'm not mad about that. But the reason why I want to talk to people like yourself, that's completely independent, or like Jason Levine, who's more aligned with some of the PPC bros and folks and stuff. And then, of course, I'm going to be talking to Bruce Party. I'm not sure you're familiar with him.
I'm familiar with Bruce.
Yeah. We're going to be talking on, what is it, the 27th or 28th. I'll make sure to give lots of notice to everyone before that takes place. But basically, I'm just reaching out to anybody. And I don't care about your political affiliations or background. But to me, we got to figure it out, just like the Americans. And I wish we could do this, be out in front of our American counterparts. It would be nice, to be honest with you, but that's not the case.
You'd think it'd be easier because there's such a smaller demographic to,
right? I don't know. It's crazy.
It's a huge land mass. That's the problem, right?
Yeah, I guess something's got to explain. But my thing is, I would like to try to replicate or duplicate the kind of success the Americans have. And instead of everyone siloing themselves, right, which is really easy to do, PPC bros silo themselves.
It's not healthy.
Libertarians silo themselves, conservatives, liberals, the disenfranchised, demoralized, the independents, all of these people, which truly would represent, as far as I'm concerned, would represent the true majority of this country. And just like with Trump, 79 million votes or whatever he got, or 77, whatever. So what it is a lot of people that would normally have some disagreements amongst each other. And because I know Americans, I traveled down America for almost 9 years straight driving long haul, and I met a lot of Americans, and they're not shy, right? They'll speak their mind. And a lot of them will have vehement disagreements. But what they showed with me is their culture, what they perceive, what they believe is the culture of their country, that idea of individual liberty. It's so important to them. They're like, screw all this shit. Trump's the only one right now. He's got the mantle. He's got the pulpit. He's not perfect by a stretch of the imagination, but we can help in that regard. That's where we step in. Okay, Trump's not perfect, but you got some really great people around Trump now. Even figures like Ron freaking Paul, for crying out loud. But like that to me is just so amazing. I never even thought the day would come where I would be resharing a tweet where it's Elon Musk, Ron Paul, and everyone resharing and retweet. It's like, wow.
And people don't realize the significance of that, right? And I think you hit it on the head there, right? It's like everyone is so compartmentalized into, and I hate even using the term, but you can compare it to a cult mentality. And that's the problem, right? Because I can sit down with the vast majority of conservatives, as long as you're not, and I'd still sit down with you, but you get this blank stare in regards to, hey, let's take a look at this. Whether if it's a fear-based response, get Trudeau, or they're so angry at Trudeau, there's certain people you can't talk to. But there's 80% of the Conservative Party members I could probably sit down with, and we're going to agree on 90 to 95% on a lot of different things, right?
Right.
But that other 5% for them is a deal breaker. You can't call him my leader. You can't. We have to wait. right? We know, let's trust him. Let's
Yeah,
do
yeah,
this, right? And so what I've been trying to do with my posts is no different than what I'm saying now is that I'm not telling you to vote for someone else. What I'm telling you
right.
is these are the questions he needs to answer, because I don't want to
Mhm.
live through what we just lived through again. We need certainty on this. We need guarantees from this. When I talk about the WEF, okay, we can go down that if you want to go down that road. But what I'm saying is
Yeah,
people post these little clips. He's in some obscure town in Alberta and he's
yeah,
answering a question. No, I want it in your policy. And I want
right.
Michelle Rempel. I want Andrew Scheer
Yeah,
removed if you're serious. It's
yeah, yeah.
talk all you want, but we're at a time where the stakes are so high, right?
Mm,
And on the PPC side, I guess by default, because a lot of people, oh, you're a PPC, bro. Because I'm by asking the questions of the Conservatives, people assume that I am with the PPC. I have a lot of friends. I support them. I've helped candidates in the past. I've helped
right.
independents in the past.
Yep.
I've helped liberals in the past. In the past, right? I didn't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that
yeah.
Marxism and all the rest of it, right?
It's
But
actually,
but
it's a
I'm much,
shame that it's a shame. Just to hate to interrupt you, but it's an absolute shame. And I've been trying to do that corrective mechanism. It's not going to work, I don't think, right in this time frame. But it's an absolute shame, actually, that the term liberal has been so soiled. If we actually stuck to the actual defined meanings of the words that we used, liberal's not a bad thing. The problem is liberals aren't very liberal anymore. That's what's. But anyway, sorry for interrupting you there,
no.
Eric.
And conservatives here aren't very conservatives anymore
No,
here, right? And
right?
that's
Yeah,
what I think is the problem. Is I think that
yeah,
moving too far, and it's not like I'm not a fan of what would be defined. And again, I don't like using these terms, but the extreme left, the woke, the gender ideology,
right.
I can't. There's no it that does not compute to me. Leave the kids alone. Like I am,
Yeah,
parental
yeah,
rights
yeah.
matter. How are we even
Yes,
having this discussion? And on the other
exactly.
side, I don't have the because I'm classified by the liberals as I'm an extreme right winger, and I'm like, how is this? Okay, I'm pro rights. I'm Canada first. I want
Yeah, yeah,
freedom of religion in this country. I
yeah.
want what the charter claims to be. I'm a Diefenbaker guy. That quote by Diefenbaker back in the day. I'm a Canadian, free to speak my mind. These are things that are to my core, right? And so as much as
Mhm.
I may not like your opinion, I don't want it silenced unless you're
Right.
calling for people to be harmed or these kinds of things. Like if you're there.
Yeah, yeah,
But at the same time, there is no room anymore, it seems, for civil discourse. You've got to
yeah.
pick a team, and
Yep.
if you're not on our team, you're against us, right? And
Yes.
so I thought to myself, is it's hard when you're um, not hard. It used to be, right? You got to toughen up. You develop the skin, right? As far as
Mhm.
you're trying to communicate to people, you're trying to get a message across. But X is not necessarily the best platform. Things like this are better, so I can articulate more of a position of understanding from where I'm coming from, at least to some level, right?
Right, right, right.
But now we're in a situation where everything is so divided and it's by design, and they don't see it, right? It's like, because I think so much of it is, yes, it's just been a revolving door, conservative liberal. They blame each other, they prorogue, they all play the same game, they go for dinner afterward, they laugh at us, right? But
Yeah,
we're in
yeah,
a situation now where there is existential things that are happening and they're being brought to the forefront that
yep,
we need to be prepared for. At the
yep.
same time, the disconnect in regards to my concerns in relation to, if there's another pandemic, can I trust the conservatives to stand up, or are they just going to step aside and run us over? I believe they will. I don't think they're going to stand up. I don't think that they have really that much control with the WHO pandemic treaty being signed. We have so many things behind the scenes where
Yeah,
sovereignty has been impacted in a negative way, and we hear nothing from these parties. We hear, well, Leslyn Lewis, but again, why is it always
yeah,
Leslyn Lewis that comes
yeah,
out
yeah,
and she
yeah,
makes a comment? No,
yeah.
you got the pulpit, like you say, with Ron Paul. He uses it,
Yes,
right? And Trump,
exactly.
he uses it.
Yeah.
Polyev is playing footsies
No.
with communists, and that's
Mhm.
not going to work. You have to own it. What are your principles? And if the Canadians, I believe firmly that if he came out and he spoke on principle, if he talked about what the problems are, what the causations are of these problems, the
Right.
Canadians would be like, so, because at least you're planting those seeds. The media doesn't talk about it, but if Polyev talks about it, they're going to attack him. At least he's got
Right.
an ability to respond to those attacks. So you get the
Yeah.
conversation going, so that when we do this transition this year, um, that we don't just get this giant cover up. Right? We've had so
Yeah.
much criminality. To me, like I'm a guy, like I'm not, am I a lawyer? No, but I understand what organized crime is. I understand what fraud
Yeah.
is on the public. I
Yeah.
understand hate speech. We can go down the list. Crimes against humanity, even on a base level. If you just want to go with organized crime, more than
Yeah.
3 people in the country working towards, like we see the Gibo 256 million siphoned to his. We got the two Randys. We got all these stories. Freeland with
Yeah.
Ukraine and her connections to the WEF with the Board of Trustees. No one ever calls it out. And
No.
when we saw in Parliament, the one Colin Kerry, the MPs, like talking about Klaus Schwab and how we've subverted the mandate of the cabinet,
Yeah.
This is the stuff nobody wants to talk about. And so that's what I look at. I'm like, okay, guys, this is a marathon. We don't have to hide under our beds. We cannot hide under our beds. We got to keep our shit together.
Yeah.
But at the same time, motivate. And like you said, when I was going through on the 2019, I helped a couple PPC candidates, not helped a couple PPC candidates, but it makes a difference when you see people showing up. And I'm at the time with one of my friends, a Liberal candidate, and I see the PPC show up. I think he was a former firefighter. You could tell that he felt like he was out of his element, right? And I even said, hey, as a member of the other team, whatever, I go and put my hat. You belong here.
Yeah.
Don't think otherwise. These are just people. So get up there and speak your mind. Tell people. And so I'm sitting there and I'm listening. And it's one of my first introductions to the PPC. And I'm like, okay. So you got to have the willingness to get in the game, but understand, it doesn't matter if you win. Much like Ron Paul, you've got to start planting those seeds in the community. So whether you're an independent, you're libertarian, you're PPC, do not be intimidated by this game. They want you to feel intimidated. You can you surround yourself with like-minded people, but have people in there that know the game. Right. And it's so very hard to bring people together nowadays, especially when you got so many shills, you got so many grifters out there that they're only looking for the likes, the clicks, or to deflect you away. A lot of the people that are like paid political operatives with accounts, that's their job. Carry water. Don't focus on A, B, and C. And we'll make sure you get paid lots of X dollars. We'll make sure you get the interviews. We'll make sure you get this and that. Again, you're a part of the problem. At the same time, there's millions of us, man. The reason I honestly believe that if it wasn't for the frozen bank accounts and making the chilling effect that came from what they did, the convoy now would be over 10 million people. We would have like, if people weren't worried about their livelihoods and still in a state of, it's like a trauma bond. Really, if you look at the psychology, it's a trauma bond. People still can't believe that the government would do that. And so they're terrified. They haven't had the chance to heal because they still got to work 2 jobs. They still got to pay for their bills. They got to take care of their family and try and learn how to live your life. And I was lucky because I had a couple of years where, I could retire and retreat and I didn't have to. So I could focus on that as far as running those different scenarios, as far as how things may play out. And in the end, there's too many good people in this country that for me, it's like, we will get there. We can get there, but too many people still need to see, they need to feel it.
Well, listen, let me roll something at you here then. And just, I want to get your
fire away, man.
Okay. I want to get your thoughts on this. So because here's what I'm trying to think is because, pattern recognition, all that stuff. I'm kind of, that's my thing a little bit too, but my biggest concern with Canada is, well, we were talking earlier a little bit about how we do definitely share some common aspects and similarities with our American counterparts. My problem with Canada, though, it goes all the way back to our founding and the story, the meta narrative in terms of the founding of the country, and the fact that Canada is much more touted and praised internally as, well, even externally, but is definitely internally as this multicultural, highly diverse country, right? And that sounds good in theory, right? To a degree, whereas America, it's not necessarily that they identify themselves as multicultural. They're American first, right? The cultural aspects in terms of your history,
huge difference.
Yeah, but the dominant feature of America is the culture is American. That's the dominant aspect. Whereas Canada, because of this constant narrative of multiculturalism, I think it actually is much more conducive to creating these silos, right? These echo chambers, because
100%.
Because that's where everyone is at these days. They don't perceive of the other people as being part of their greater community per se. It's almost like everything's set up almost like a zero-sum game, right? It's if we as an identifiable group don't go in and use politics or the government, to make society in the image we want it, well, these people will do it in their stead. So it once again, it functions as a zero-sum game, and it's a very, very difficult. What I like to do is, and other people, if you do want to do this for yourself, I think it does for me, helps me think about things better, is think about society and government as just a family, mom and dad and the kids and the cousins or whatever, and the neighbors or whatever, or maybe not neighbors, let's say cousins, second cousins, and uncles and nieces and nephews. So think about what the term multiculturalism. Well, what could that really mean in a family type setting? And I'm sure we could all live in different homes. We could all choose to wear different clothing. We could all choose to go to different movies. But at the end of the day, wouldn't there have to be? And I would say there is, because I have my own family. But the ones how a family stays cohesive and respecting of each other's sovereignty and all that stuff, is we all have to bare minimum share some very, very common baseline, morality and ethics. Like that's the principles of morality and
your values.
And the absence of that, and where I see the biggest problem, and where the seemingly divide between Canada and the US, and with the echo chambers and stuff, is US is all about predominantly the individual, right? Whereas Canada, because of the culture of multiculturalism, is not. It basically is group versus group. It's group identity. It's
tribal warfare, man.
Yeah, it's more of a collectivism mindset. And you know yourself, the problem with any ideology, whether you're talking socialism, fascism, communism, any of these things, the minute it's collective in term, well, the individual is basically wiped out, right? The individual no more really carries any weight or water, if it's outside the scope of what you can benefit the group. So I think that is a key factor. But the question I have for you is, knowing these differences between us and our culture, do you believe that it's even possible in Canada, or am I even wasting my time on this venture? Is it even possible for Canada to try to replicate the kind of successes American has, or at least, well, we're still early, so I don't want to tout American success under the leadership of Trump yet, right? Because we don't know how that can pan out. Just
hypothetically, right? Yeah.
But hypothetically, but at least initially, they somehow managed to get it done. Is that something that we could possibly, in your mind, with all the knowledge you've had, all the things that you've been paying attention to over the years, is that even a possibility in Canada?
Well, I think that it's one of those things where I do think it's possible, right? But at the same time, the level of divide within our country is never been more, right? And they've just flooded the country with a lot of people that don't give a crap about this country. And so I think that we're starting a little bit behind the 8 ball, because now even if you, because even with some groups, right, it's like, what people ask me all the time, I'm a Canadian, I'm proud Canadian. What is a Canadian? Right. I know that's a loaded question, because everyone's going to have a different interpretation of what that means. Right. But for me, I'm not like a Canadian as a Canadian. Right. Like I've had a lot of experience working with immigrant groups in the past. Right. These are people that came over, they went through the process properly. They contribute to the economy. I can't tell you, because I don't drive. Right. So how many cab drivers? I'm a former engineer. I'm a former doctor. These kinds. So I asked, why did you come here? And it's like, I don't want to wake up in a country where I don't know if my neighbors or my home's going to be bombed. Okay. So if you're coming here, you want to contribute to the economy, you believe in Canada and what the charter stands for. Like, I don't even think we have public swearing of the oath when people become citizens now. So I think there's been such a degradation towards the standards as far as who we're immigrating. So if we take a look at the where we're at, if we remove the mass migration and the problems, we can talk about the Great Replacement theory if you want. I think there's some merit to it as far as some of the things that are happening there. But in regards to it, I think that we're so polarized that people are now in a situation where there is no real help from government, right? And should there be, is the question. Right, like so we can have that overall, but when the government creates circumstances where people are desperate, wages aren't growing, massive debt that we're paying on, what this ridiculous spending that that the government gets involved in, like basically chaining generations to come to this debt. So when then we take a look at all of the gerrymandering with the divisive policies like DEI, like what we see, how many churches in this country have burned over the past few years, and there's been nothing done about it, nothing said, right? Very little being said. And so I think that the efforts that right now, if you can get those efforts that are coming from government, whether overtly or covertly, to keep us divided is what they want. Because I can't tell you how many times it's like when I'm walking around with the charter. So if we use the charter as a baseline, if you remove the reasonable loophole from that, as far as these are our rights, these are God-given, however you want to frame it, right? Like these are absolute piss off, right? Then you have a starting point with regards to, I can agree with that. I might not agree with some of the things you're saying, and that's why I was able to walk into mosques. I was able to walk into synagogues. I was able to walk as somebody who's I'm not religious. I'm very spiritual. I have my relationship with the universe is a private one, but I have respect for whatever you want to do, as long as you're not hurting people, right? We can define hurt, but at the same as a baseline, I look at it going, okay, Like, I will stand beside you if your rights are attacked. You stand beside me if your rights are under attack. We don't have that. When they say we don't have a national identity, well, that's by design, right? So if you can segment, you can compartmentalize everybody. Because at one issue, it's like when we saw the gender ideology, I can't tell you, it's like we had the convoy, and then all of a sudden I see Muslim, Christians, and Jewish and other faiths are coming together against gender ideology. What? We're going to have this massive million-man march. People put their differences aside, and they're like, children matter, stop this. And then what happens? The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right as it was happening, right? So immediately that divide. Every time we try to come together, these I'm not, again, do I have proof that that was a part of it? But it was just very convenient when you had all these religions coming together to say no to mutilating children, yes to parental rights, trying to come together and say this is what we believe. There's always something that happens where the puppet masters do it to create that division. I lost a lot of friends because I don't speak out on either side of that. I don't really want to get into it. I believe human rights are human rights. A large part of me believes war on its own is primitive. We don't need to be doing this. We shouldn't be funding it. We should, you know, like I remember growing up, and how much of it is real when you look back. It's like, I don't know if this, you know, they after COVID, you're just kind of like, I'm not sure exactly what is history, right? It's defined by those who won the wars. Well, who won the wars, right? But when you look back, I remember growing up and like hearing from people, it's like people were wearing around the world, they were wearing Canadian flags. They were Americans wearing Canadian flags when they were going around doing their touring because we were so looked at as peacekeepers. And we can take a look at what was actually going on the ground. There's controversy wherever you want to look. But I remember having that national pride of we didn't get involved. We stood up for what was right. We believed in free speech. Like all of this, what appears to be a mirage. So it's like we're such a young country. When I say that to people, it's like they don't realize we didn't have those defining moments where we had to say, what do we believe in? What do we stand for? Where are my brothers and sisters when it comes to being Canadian? And I think that, you know, we're in a situation now where so much.
Canada as a country is less than 2 human lifetimes old for Canada.
Two people. Two people. And so that's why people are like, how can you be so optimistic? And I'm like, because I am. We need to go through these growing pains. And so, let the Conservatives win the next election. But 6 months afterwards, you better wake up because we got work to do, right? Like we can't drop the ball on this because we're never going to get this kind of opportunity again to define our country, define who we are, what we want to be moving forward, and enshrining those rights. You know, we can talk about accountability. I've very rarely seen accountability in my lifetime, and I've been in so many wars. That needs to change, right? Our politicians are now the elites driving Maseratis. They're getting $250,000 a year. Do you think they're affected by, you know, like we are sitting here looking at the taxation without representation. We're checking off all the boxes, and what I'm hoping doesn't happen, because again, I've kind of got to the point now where I think things are too far advanced where an armed revolution is something that would be successful. No, I don't think that. I think that that's what they want. That's what they will put more to. Every time we see anything that's violent, we need more laws, and the cage gets smaller for us. But I think our minds is where we need to unify. Our mouths, our presence, because you mentioned it. We're in the smallest population, largest landmass. It's very hard for us to be seen publicly as far as where does the community stand. So we stay in our little caves, for lack of a better term, within our own little echo chambers. And we don't actually get out there and start to do the work. The real work starts locally in your communities. It doesn't start with a trek to Ottawa, right? You got to get local. You got to start looking at plugging yourself in, identifying the games, the agendas that are being played locally, because they're there. Look, all you got to do is look, and you'll see it.
Actually, now that, and I just want to bring up the fact that because you brought up the Great Replacement, and let me tell you, as a libertarian, especially when I was on my my early journey, you know, after the 2008 and the Ron Paul thing, some of the people that kind of surround themselves around me, I guess, or I surround themselves around them, I guess, that we came loosely associated with during that whole time. There were a lot of people that were against, you know, this statute. Crazy enough, Anonymous. Weirdly enough, Anonymous back in the day used to be against things. Now somehow Anonymous has gone woke. I don't know how that happened, but anyway, I digress there because that's today. I still have some old memes from back in the Ron Paul days that I share. It's like, I like this Anonymous.
Expect us, right? Like I remember those days when I would be excited. They drop something on a Friday night, and it's like, all right, let's get.
But one of the big divides. It was real early on. actually that I found. Oh, so it's kumbaya when you're talking about what you're against, like, the establishment or whatever, right? Or at the time, maybe it was just they were against the neocons, and we shared that common interest, I guess.
Mhm.
But the thing I noticed right away, which was a big wedge issue among libertarians, was the whole immigration thing. And I started out early on because it made sense when people said about nobody should be able to control where people travel. And I kind of fell for that initially because, yeah, it kind of makes sense, right?
Mhm.
But then all it took, and it wasn't even just Milton Friedman, it just took anyone basically explaining to me, yeah, but the welfare state, right? The welfare state kind of changes the paradigm because, of course, I should have no control over what people do. It's not if they're not affecting my life. But the minute you're affecting my life, right, then, yeah, you kind of got me involved
You
here.
got my
So,
attention.
right? You got my attention, right? And I would say the same thing, and I'm consistent. I would do the same thing for domestic Canadians that are already here. That
Mhm.
the minute there's forced income or wealth redistribution, I've got to be concerned about people internally and externally. So and that's where I had a big falling out with, I guess back then would have been the ANCOM type of people, right? The anarchist communist types.
Right.
But once again, but to me, the new thing, which created a big wedge, was the thing that you brought up, the Great Replacement. But that got me to thinking too. And I just want to get your thoughts on this thing, because so that the people who are watching us can understand our thoughts, not what other people think of what the Great Replacement represents. But I'll just give you a quick synopsis of my thoughts on it. So when I think about the Great Replacement, I just think of okay, so if your domestic population, which is a fact, right? A fact is shrinking by sheer fact that or will shrink. Right now, it might not be shrinking, but in terms of the what used to comprise the domestic population, so it would have been WASPs in particular in Canada. Now we can go further back and get even worse on the Great Replacement if you want to bring the First Nations people and all that stuff, right? Because there's not the first time the Great Replacement's
Absolutely. Good to
right?
note that, though. I appreciate that.
But I'm just saying, though, it definitely is. I mean, you have to kind of be really naive and stupid or not think it at all to think that, well, if your domestic population or the people, that kind of culture that they've kind of, at least most of them, not all, but seem to be the bulk of them, shared in similar backgrounds and values and common ancestry and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
The minute you introduce other people, like if that faction is shrinking and you're bringing in new people who don't quite share that, and even the people who are now the leaders of the country don't even share those similar common values or interests, well, how does it not lead to, I don't necessarily like the term the Great Replacement, but how does it
No,
not
neither.
ultimately, whether it's done nefariously or just, I imagine, I don't even think for the most part, I don't even think it's done for nefarious reasons. I think it's a bunch of number crunchers thinking, shit, we've got so much debt and deficit that there ain't enough Canadians here going to be able, and we got a whole cohort of boomers.
It could be.
Right? I don't know how many tens of millions.
We're not having babies, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like we got to bring people in here to, well, keep the GDP up, to take care of all the old people that are retiring. There's all kinds of, but once again, to pretend, or for anyone that's talked about this stuff, what kind of irks me is the only conversations I ever hear talked about are people that are on the fringes. Why can't I see, people that would be reasonable, which is what we're trying to do here. I consider myself reasonable. I consider yourself reasonable. Why can't we just talk about this? Or why can't audiences have access to conversations where you're talking about this stuff in a manner that's, don't care. I don't even care what country they're come per se, because there's some countries in the Eastern Bloc of Europe, former Europe, that I'm not a big fan of their kind of culture either. Okay, so you know what I mean. There's all kinds of areas, and once again, when you're talking about culture, you're still talking about groups of people. So at the individual level, sure, there's probably some great people, no doubt about it. I have no doubt there's some, but once again, it's the same thing when you talk about. Here's the thing: white, First Nations, black, brown. I grew up around them, and I've been around people of all different races and color, and I've never found any situation where it's that difficult to get along with. As a matter of fact, I was only 12 years old when my parents moved me to Toronto, threw me into the East End of Scarborough, where I was surrounded by the Jamaicans, the Punjab, but I didn't care, and I didn't have this thing. Unfortunately, my grandmother raised me to treat people with respect and all that stuff, and I didn't have any issues. But what I did notice. And it didn't matter if they were the white gangs, the brown gangs, the black gangs. It didn't matter. But what I did always notice is the minute you get large groups, right, and you become very tribalized in terms of your in-group type of preference, and you perceive the othering of other people, that's where the conflict arises. And that's what, like I say, so to me, it's not about whether we're bringing brown people per se, because I've met some really awesome brown people. No,
100%.
matter of fact, I tell this to some white people and they get pissed off me when I say that. I say, actually, you know what? Most of the people that have caused me harm in my life share my exact same skin color, to be honest.
Right. It's like 80-20.
Right. So it's not really about colors or races, but it definitely is an area where you definitely have to be concerned. And that's somewhere where, like I say, that's where the media, that's where academia, that's where politicians are failing the Canadian people from not allowing them to be able to think about these things critically enough, where it's not that you're going to have to run to one side or the other, where it's, oh yes, we should welcome everybody and anyone, or we got to shut down the border. And that's basically the only two scenarios and stuff I'm hearing from the dominant voices out there. And it really irks me, because that's not the kind of conversation that I think needs to take place. Anyway, sorry for rambling on there, but what are your thoughts on that anyways?
No, I agree with you. I think that's the problem is that the media and the game likes to only focus on the polarizing side of things, right? They don't want to be real about it. And I've been saying this for years. We have to start being adults, right? They treat us like kids. They play with our emotions. They try to play with our emotions, right? So they get us all. It's like this all or nothing thing. And I grew up in the same as you. Like I think we're both Gen X, right?
Yes.
We come from this wasn't a problem.
I feel very fortunate for the fact that I am a Gen X.
We can remember before technology, right? And so I can remember growing up. Race was not an issue.
No,
honestly, like, I mean, yes, obviously there were racists, right? There were people that they did their thing, but as far as I'm concerned, growing up in high school, there was no, like, I remember, actually, I can remember when I was in university, I went and did a practicum out in Abbotsford Secondary School, and I go into the lunchroom, and I'm seeing segregated. The East Indian community is Punjab sitting together, the whites are sitting together. There's no intermingling, and I thought to myself, how is that possible? How could we have gone so far backward from what I remember growing up? Because I did, like, I'm Black, Native. It did not matter. Your skin color didn't matter. It was content of character, right? I'm a Martin Luther King guy with that. It's like, it doesn't matter. All these other things don't matter. It's content of the character that you should be focused on. And so now we're coming today where you have migrants being lumped in with immigrant people who've come here, and it's the same thing. I'll even say, like, I go off a lot about the CCP. Right. I the foreign interference. I know it's not just them and whatever, but I had numerous friends growing up that were Chinese. And even for the longest time, I had a naturopath pharmacist, right? Nicest guy you would ever meet. Very happy to be here, was very pro charter, so for us it's a very easy tool for them to use to divide us. If your color is not, if your skin color is not this color, right? Then you should have a problem with them. Right. And that keeps the dialogue from, it keeps us from ever finding those core principles, those core values that we do agree on. I will stand by you, you stand by me. We might not agree on some things, but these are the things we agree on. This is what will define us, and you can count on me to be there for you. Everything they do now is to prevent that. You're either part of a cult, you pick a cult, and you have to conform to that. We're the saviors. We're going to do this. And I still think the vast majority of Canadians are in the middle. Whether you are PPC, whether you're conservative, you're looking for even some liberals. Like I was never like a liberal, but at the same time, there are people that are looking at this going, this is effing crazy. Where are the adults in the room? How did all these narcissists get power? It's because of apathy by design. They divided the family unit way back. We can go into that as well too, as far as the strategic deployment of dividing the family so that the state in this country can become the parent for every family, because they keep you distracted, right? And you go through like a lot of the boomer generation and stuff, and even with my mother and stuff, we'll have conversations. She watches CTV, she watches CBC and stuff like that, and I'm just like, okay, let's have that talk again. Like, I don't want to shatter your world or anything like that. You have to understand propaganda. Like, this is it's what they don't talk about. That's the problem, right? And so to try and introduce the boomer generation to what is actually going on, I don't think that, I was in a space the other day and we had a millennial and he was coming out and he was saying Gen X needs to step aside. The boomers need to step aside. The millennials are going to do this. And for the first time, I'm thinking to myself, hold on, son. Right? It's like, why start off your conversation? I love the passion. I love your message. Get on that fucking horse. Sorry. Get on that horse. Sorry for the language.
Oh no, that's good.
All right. But there's so many more of us that if we could actually just get past these hyper sensitive issues that blind you to seeing the overall pictures, that we should be able to have civil discourse, we should be able to disagree on things. And so for me, I'm concerned when I look at for me, when it comes to the great replacement, so I'll circle back here. You could be right. The boomer generation's retiring. This up and coming generations aren't exactly work ethic oriented. Not all, but I'm saying that there's been a shift from our generation over the years as far as what the expectations are. I had 2 jobs when I was 15 because I wanted to play hockey. You work. If you want something, you work for it, right? But at the same time, my fear is, and when I'm walking as a former advocate, there are so many Canadians, mostly European descent and Indigenous. I will say a lot of Indigenous community members that are homeless. That are out there, and its tent cities are everywhere. So my concern is that you create a situation where because if the Canadians actually knew how much money that has been borrowed by this government on without any oversight, they've either stolen it or they've given it away. They're borrowing the money and they're redistributing the wealth to their friends and their family and all these other people, right? So we are looking at that through the inflation, and anyone who's shopping can see. Are you kidding me? And everyone's like, oh, conservatives will fix it. Well, okay, but what if they don't? Right. So now you start.
Can I just say something real quick there in terms of the inflation? Because that's another thing that really irks me. I could actually right now, if I wanted to, I won't waste your time, but if anyone wants to, you can actually go into the Bank of Canada and just do a search, and you'll be able to pull up from their own website, which is what drives me nuts, where they admit that yes, central bank policy, stimulus, QE, what Americans call it. That is where inflation comes from. But the fact that there's large, substantial portions of not just the Canadians who've all long past graduated from high school or university, whatever they went to, but even the ones that are coming out of them today that still think that grocery stores are out there just arbitrarily deciding they want to make your life miserable. So that, and my wife works actually for one of the big grocers in Canada. But to me, that's another thing that drives me nuts is we live in the age of information. This is for someone like me, and I'm sure, and probably like you, it's the most disturbing thing about all this is you can understand this if you were living in the dark ages. The fact that there's this many people in 2025, this ignorant to so many things that can be proved to be objectively true, and so many facts that are at their disposal. So many people like me and Kris willing to say, here, I'll show you. Here, just start there and just work your way. Take your time, go down whatever rabbit hole you want. But the fact that there's so many people are blissfully ignorant, and the people in charge of educating and informing are literally hiding the keys to the kingdom, more or less, or basically just hiding all this information from them or deceiving them entirely. To me, that's the part that's so disturbing, because it's difficult enough for someone like you or I to even find an audience. But even if we could have the audience and we have the proper incentives, the proper reasoning behind us, the proper information to try to help elevate people's mindsets, it's probably only going to tacitly work for a small percentage of them, because you got a coordinated and concerted effort of people who are sophists and liars and propagandists who are just constantly, because once again, they're benefiting from the status quo. So they're like, nah,
they don't want to change.
You're not doing nothing to, you know what I mean, mess this up. But that, I think, is the part that's most disturbing, is the fact, like I say, I picture going 100 years in the future and talking to some people and say, oh, wait a minute, you guys had all of that. So you had everything right there. You were sitting on a pile of books, right? That gave you all the information that you needed to get out from that disaster of a mess you're under, but you just kept sitting on the books and using them as a seat warmer, right? So
because there's always a squirrel to chase.
Right?
There's always something that is a distraction. Right. And it's like you're dead on, because it's when I found out, like, it's like if Canadians actually understood that they spend more right now, today, we're spending more to service the debt that this government has put us in than they do on healthcare.
Exactly. The golden child, like the Canadians love their golden egg of the healthcare. So they should be really pissed off about the fact that actually, just interest, just pissing money away, is literally,
because they're just sitting there. COVID hits, and it's not always just been COVID, but COVID, it was just like a free for all, a circus. Right. It's just like sign here, and nobody. Again, it's like I take that, because if it was different and we're going to see the same thing, not the same thing, because again, it's the cyclical nature of conservative liberal.
Right.
But again, they know the system. They know the problem. So the conservatives are not, they will call out, oh, we're doing this, this, and this, but there's no actual effort to change that system, to change how we operate with monetary policy, to hold the Bank of Canada to account. I don't think Canadians should be on the debt. We should be held to pay the debt for Stephen Guilbeault's $256 million that he funneled to his own company. How is this even reality? Chrystia Freeland, $2 billion company that they gave her the money. Where did it go? Catherine McKenna, the same thing. These infrastructure. Come on, guys. Seriously, can we? And then you go and you see, how long has it been since you've had a steak? I don't have, like, I can have one every now and again, but again, have you seen the prices? How much are you paying for gas? How much are you paying for rent? How much are your utilities paying? These people are making $250,000 a year, plus their expenses are paid for. And you're worried about, and you get Jagmeet Singh out there saying, oh, it's the CEOs, their bonuses. Seriously, do you understand supply and demand? Do you understand the cost to transport things? Do you understand when the dollar's worth nothing? Again, like, nobody knows these basic tenets, and they just think that if only the next person comes in, it will get better. Well, I've got news for you. This time, it's not going to get better. Because everyone's been so apathetic for decades, thinking that they'll leave it to this next person, leave it to the next person. And we can talk about foreign interference. We don't need to, right? They're right here. The ones that are operating, the ones that are doing it, the ones that have their offices are right there. But we don't see this activation. It's Canadians are so complacent. And don't get me wrong, like I talk to a lot of Americans, we're not nice. Honestly, I know a lot of Canadians, when it comes to principle, they will stand their ground. They will tell you to go F yourself. I've done it numerous times. Yes, I don't want you to suffer. If you need the shirt off my back today, what's your circumstances? Yeah, I'll give it to you. I'll help you out. My neighbor needs something. Sure, I'll give it to you. Don't mess with my rights, though. And so I think a lot of people have forgotten it, and they believe when Trudeau says that we don't have a national identity, because that's planting a seed. That is making you think that because you do have principles, that you do stand for something, but you're standing alone. Not true. We are in a situation where again, I'll say it one more time, largest landmass, smallest population, hard to organize when the government's threatening to freeze your bank accounts. Interesting. But the conservatives say nothing about it. So we are in a place of having to literally, the train wreck has to come, man. I don't know if you I'm glad you brought up the conservatives, actually, because once again, just to show that we're both equal opportunists here in terms of, talk about the establishment, because the liberals have, they've had, well, almost 10 years now going on of just, destroying this country. But once again, but there's a lot of Canadians, and when I hear, especially younger Canadians in particular, and actually it's really weird to me as a Gen Xer growing up, if you had told my 20-year-old self that, in your 50s, it's going to be the conservatives that are going to be promoted as counterculture, right? What? Rebels? Rabble-rousers are fucking conservatives? Are you kidding me? This has got to be a joke, right? But that's a belly laugh, right? Yeah.
It really is. But to me, the whole thing with the conservatives that drives me nuts, and you see the young people gravitating towards them. And listen, I recognize, based on the parliamentary system, how it works, you know what? Pierre Poilievre probably has to. If we want to get rid of Trudeau, basically it seems like the only game in town. So I'm pragmatic like everyone else. But I mean, come on, can we at least stop fooling young people or young Canadians? Can we stop treating them like infants and convince them that the conservatives are somehow going to be their salvation or their saviors? Because the thing to me is, all you have to do is go back to, and I remember at the time, I tried my best to hold the conservatives to account, and man, I got just as much backlash, probably even worse from them than I did in liberals when I kept pointing out. I made a couple videos about it. I still reshare from time to time, is the whole bank bailout. And it amazes me how many Canadians, like, I talk to Canadians all the time. I got verbal diarrhea when I'm out in public, because I like to see, do people actually think the same way in person as they do online? And sadly enough, I've been disappointed that during COVID people will fall for some crazy shit.
COVID, for sure.
If CBC or CTV tells them, right? But I mean, if you talk about the housing market of this country, at least what the Americans did in the 2008 crisis, and while the Canadians sat up here, in particular the conservatives, with snubbing their nose down, looking down through their noses at the Americans for going through their great financial crisis, well, that was a little bit of somewhat of a reset, at least, because the prices for houses in the U.S., dropped dramatically, and you had a lot of people. Now, no doubt there's some nefarious people, some investors and rent seekers that probably soaked up a lot of that, but it did give a lot of young people the opportunity to get their foot in the housing market. which now, if you look at them, that growth trajectory for them, their GDP per capita and how much better they're doing as a society now, well, that proved much more effective, right? Even though they didn't let everything crash, they did bail out one bank. What was it, Lehman's Lehman's, I think it was. But basically, they did at least let some of the market do some corrective
And they
mechanism.
bailed out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac there too. Those
Yeah,
were
yeah. That's true. Actually, that's true. That would have been basically the CMHC equivalency, right? Yeah. So yes, that's true. And yeah, I'm definitely against that kind of cronyism too. But at least the Americans, at least even though they did a bailout, they were at least, well, we're going to at least try to pretend that we're still going to allow some. But there was a market correction at the bare minimum. There was a market correction. Whereas Canada, I remember when it was presented, $114 billion is what it took. And it was the IMF, the Federal Reserve, and the Bank of Canada in conjunction that bailed out all of our big six banks to the tune of 114 billion. Two of the banks, I think it was Royal Bank was one of them, was bailed out to the tune of 1.5. So basically, if you had bought every share in the Royal Bank and then another half of that to recapitalize them so they could continue on their schemes, is how much they were bailed out. And yet it was reported on once. It did get reported on. CBC had to, National Post had to, CTV, Globe Mail, they all did report on it, but never talked about, basically, again, they just swept on the rug. And I, like I say, keep bringing it up periodically from time to time.
Just to remind people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, because if you're a young person and you realize that you're never going to get in the housing market, well, yes, those conservatives that are pretending that they're your best friends nowadays, a lot of those people, and once again, I'm not saying them all. So hold these ones. Go to their voting record. Go to whoever the hell these people were, right? Go to the individual. Treat them like an individual. Be like a libertarian. Treat these people as individuals. And the one that voted to keep you economically enslaved or keep you suppressed and not give you the leg up or the opportunity that your parents or grandparents had, get rid of those people. And always keep in mind that, yes, be strategic. If conservatives are a best option to get rid of the worst option right now, Trudeau, not going to be harping on you, not going to say you should make a different decision, but at least be wise enough and astute enough to know that, this is just a lesser of evil. But what we really need to do, this is okay in the interim, but what we really need to do is find a way of finding some area of unity and find out a way to get out from underneath this shit of going back and forth, like you were saying earlier, with this left or right or liberal versus conservative, and just get to the point where it's actually just freedom. And then whether you're a conservative, liberal, NDP, socialist, you can get back to just maybe trying to enjoy your life. That's a beautiful thing of it, that no matter what side of the political divide you come from, if government is so tiny it's not much of a threat to your life, well, it doesn't matter who the hell is in charge, right? That to me is the biggest thing, is like we really need in society, even for the American stuff, you just need a referee or someone to arbitrate disputes and the ability to defend people from force. That can happen. It's like we're not reinventing the wheel, people. It's not like we don't have access to knowledge or tools or things to make these things a reality without requiring a behemoth state that actually is the antithesis of actually doing that too. Anyways, once again, I kind of went on a bit of a ramble, Chris. I tend to do that from time to time. But once again, share your thoughts on that too.
Well, I think it's important because people, that's the one thing I realized is that, and that's why a lot of on my page, I'm constant friendly reminder, right? Like, it's just like the attention span, because I do come back to the last 4 years being, I think a lot of people are still in a very trauma induced, right? Fear. And they've just, there's like their world is it looks to be, crumbling around them. And in many ways, I guess it is, but at the same time, it's perspective, right? When you look back and you see the systems that have created this, right? And so, and you look at past behavior as a best indicator for future behaviors, right? And so when we see that this is very, and it's important you mentioned that, right? It's like, is it all conservatives? No, a lot of people don't realize that it doesn't matter whether it's Scheer, O'Toole, Polyev, it's CPCHQ.
Yeah.
It's the people that are there that are the problem, as far as the drivers of the narratives, of the policy agendas. These people are just figureheads that are put out there. And that's why you see, that's what bothers me is, right? I don't think parties should have whips. I think you should be able to speak your mind, right? I don't think you should have to vote again, because the party says. That's why I have a difficult with the conforming. It's like, if I don't agree with something, no. Right? So just because I'm wearing a different armband, what that person just said doesn't have any merit?
Yeah.
Where are we as far as how infantile we are when it comes to civil discourse and what is in the best interest of the people. And that's when it comes back. I think Trudeau's hired like 100,000 bureaucrats. Like, I can't remember the number, right? But it's funny because you look at the unemployment rates, not realizing that the majority of the employment is now being just shifted over to the government, which is scary for me, not only on the amount of money that it's going to cost for us to actually facilitate that on the tax, to pay, but it also creates conformity if you have another health emergency, right? That's a lot of people that you'll even see on X now, they had no choice, right? And this, Trudeau, I didn't force anybody, and it's like, right? Do you understand that coercion is force?
I got a little thing that I use for the whole thing like that. I just use the example of, if you put this really hot chick in your basement and you tell her you can't leave, oh, I'm not going to rape you, I'll never rape you, but you can never leave until you have sex with me. He's like, hey, I didn't force you.
I didn't force you.
Right?
You like, see the meme with Weinstein really comparing the two, right? Yeah. And so people were put into.
Yeah, let me ask you one more question, Kris, actually, because now that you brought up about the Conservatives, actually brought me to another line that I was going to deal with you in terms of, so Trudeau, actually, that's one thing I will say about Canada and the difference between the U.S. When he first telling young people you can smoke your weed legally, and I knew that was going to get a lot of people, not just young people. I knew that was going to hook a lot of people in. But the other major promise that got a lot of Canadians was the whole promise, this is the last first past the post system we're going to, right? Now, to me, the one thing I will say with Canada having all this multiculturalism, the one actually represent, I'm not a big fan of any kind of democracy, to be honest with you, but the one form of democracy that I think at least would be conducive, and Europeans have this thing they do over there, is or proportional even. Yeah. Even if it's proportional. At bare minimum, you don't have just one or two of these established parties, right? And you're stuck with that basic binary. U.S. has two. We have basically three, but really, as you've seen, it still ended up being two. The Liberals and NDP just amalgamated and became one, right? As far as I'm concerned, anyways. So,
very true.
But to me, the beautiful thing, what I perceive of, at least now, and tell me if I'm wrong, please do. Be honest with me, brutally. But my thinking is, if we had at least even just something called proportional representation, geez, Maxime might have even had the opportunity to get a seat. You might have a couple of libertarians in there. Bare minimally, you would have some voices within the House that's actually not just chirping, like you say, the top-down message from whether it's CPC or Party LPs, whatever the hell you call them, or NDP. At least you would have ideas in question period for the people that want to, watch question period. Although I prefer to watch paint dry, to be honest with you. But for the people that do want to pay attention, at least you would have the kind of things you have. Once again, you kind of have access to the bully pulpit. Doesn't mean your message is going to resonate with people, but at least you have the ability to put your message out there somewhere in the House or whatever. Is that something that you think might be conducive to helping Canadians in some regard going forward? If it's something that maybe any party or maybe Pierre Poilievre might pick up and say, well, let's have some kind of, but that's the other thing too. He'd probably turn out like the Liberals and say, that probably won't benefit us, right? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that kind of thing? Or direct democracy, like you say, what's kind of a thing that might help Canadians in that regard?
Well, I think it's like the most important thing that we have right now. When we witnessed and that's why I say I got to the part where I'm just like, yeah, it's a uniparty. Mm-hmm. We don't have independent voices in Parliament, right? Everyone's got a whip, so you toe the line, and even if it's just out of, we're worried what the media is going to say, who cares?
Yeah.
What the media says. What is your principles? You know that things are happening to Canadians, and whether it was 6 million or 10 million of us that decided that we weren't going to participate in this grand experiment. Mm-hmm. There was still 6 to 10 million, and nobody stood up for us in Parliament and said, "Hey, we've got rights here." And so my thought is that it's a crucial part of the game, right? You control the media, you control the narrative. You control Parliament, you control the narrative. Yeah. And so we need to break that bubble. We need, am I a big fan of Fox News? No, but at least the States has Fox News. Are they largely neocons? You know what I mean? We can get into the debate of how independent they are, but at least you have the other side of the coin. And right now we have hegemony. We have complete hegemony with our media. They will not touch certain things. They only go after certain things. People don't realize we have the same thing in Parliament. There are issues that the Conservatives will not touch, specifically the freaking trauma that this government put on us,
which is
right. I'm doing fine. I've spent the time. I put time in, but I know. I look at the suicide rates. I look at MAID. I look at all of these, the poverty. I look at the food bank lines. Come on, man. The injuries for the vaccines. But apparently, it's like we can't speak about that because we might lose votes. You're in super majority territory. And you still can't get up there and say, hey, we might want to, hold off. We've got some evidence here that you might not want to keep lining up for these things because they could be causing you harm. We can't do that. And that's what makes me so upset. I agree with you on a premise. Yes, we should have proportional representation. We need libertarians. We need PPC. We need Canadian Heritage Party. Get the faith-based in there. I don't care. People need to be able to feel that they have some level of representation. And right now they've got everybody blocked off. The media's got everybody blocked off. And we're supposed to believe this system is what's going to cause us no, this is how we got here, right? We need to be able to take a step back and say, these people don't represent our interests. And again, when I say, if you're a conservative MP and by chance you're watching this, grow a freaking spine. What's the worst that's going to happen? Oh, they're going to kick me out of the party? For what? Trying to help Canadians? So show the Canadian people that this is what it's about. It's about protecting your own interests. So by you sitting there thinking, I need my check, I need my pension, let's just wait till the next election. And I get into it with people in my comments. It's like, this is a strategic thing. He needs to do this. And it's like, so give me a number. How many Canadians dead or maimed? I need a number. I need you to tell me specifically what is an acceptable loss to you. Who is disposable? If it was your mom, would that change your opinion? If it was your daughter, would that change your opinion? They won't think. They just think in political terms of Trudeau bad. We need to replace them, but they're not looking at what they're replacing. So I look at it. It's like, if I was leader of the Conservative Party, why would I be silent? Unless that I have an alternative agenda. You think Canadians are stupid?
Yeah.
Right? Like, say, what about for answers for Sean? Lost his son.
Yeah.
Not enough for you, man?
Actually, you know what? Talk about Pierre Poilievre. I haven't finished it yet. I think I'm almost 50 minutes. I think it's an hour and 44 minutes long. But I was watching that interview with Jordan Peterson, because I too like to hear these things. I don't just want to hear other people's, thoughts on it. I want to hear it for myself, and then I'll form my own thoughts. But there's already been a couple examples in there, and like I say, mad respect for Jordan Peterson and the fact that he stood up. Now, of course, it was against his own, like it was for his personal reasons, because he felt the time that he was being compelled into this speech. C-16 was going to be a direct threat to him and his stances and the way he thought. So it was definitely a personal thing for him. And like I said, I'm a matter of fact, people like Jordan Peterson, who actually comes from a psychological background as a psychologist, really helped me in terms of understanding, because I like philosophy, I like history, I like even religion, but the psychology was that missing piece for me, because I didn't really understand much human psychology as a young man. Nothing didn't really interest me too much, but all these things come together really helped me to think critically about things, and even in terms of like God and mysticism and stuff. And I'm glad to see these great conversations taking place. What I feel that's taking place, and I want to get your thoughts on this too, though, is not only did Pierre Poilievre miss a couple key examples where he could have really showed Canadians that I am, or if I want to pretend that I'm even Trump-like and have the courage of my convictions and going to say the right things, he had a couple really key opportunities that he didn't take advantage. And there was a couple times when Jordan Peterson, during questioning, where Jordan Peterson, and if it had been me, would have did a little bit of pushback, and Pierre would have found himself backed into a pretty shitty corner, right? Yeah. But none of that happened. And here's my concern. Let me just lay it out real quick. My concern is for those of us that are truly, the disenfranchised and not part of either side of the political divide, let's say, it seems like our voices, we're still allowed to kind of still function in even our own little chambers. Sure, me and Kris, we could talk all day if we want, man. But I tell you, the dominant voices out there these days are not the Ron Paul people that are repeating Ron Paul slogans or stuff like that. No, it's now people who seem like they want to pick up that mantle and make the right. The right is going to be the new, just like after we came out of the dark ages and the Enlightenment era, that's going to be back then the progressives or the liberals of the day. Well, that's going to be the new thing going forward, is going to be the conservatives. But once again, I feel we're just going to be stuck in another quagmire of more top-down collectivism and authoritarian collectivism. It's just going to be with a different style, a little different messaging. And that is my biggest concern going forward. Is I'm all happy that at least there's these people that have the ability and the competence and the knowledge and the intelligence to push back against some of the insanity, especially the woke left. But once again, they're not, I don't feel that they're actually, like, I just measured up against me, the kind of truth that I would be bringing to bear. And I don't look at people. This is another thing. I find it very paternalistic. And I hear even other people that talk to me. It's like, well, maybe they're more effective because they're, watering it down for them, and it's more absorbable to the population. Yeah, I get it, but that sounds very fucking paternalistic. I'm not that kind of person. I'd rather just give you the cold hard facts. And if you have concerns, if I can't help you myself, maybe I'll point to other people might be able to help you, or maybe you can find out and seek information that can help you on your own. I don't know, but I'd bare minimally, if I want to properly inform you, I want to at least let you know. Like if you're walking through the woods, I'm going to let you know there's a possibility there's a bear about a half mile down. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, because there's a very real threat and some danger if you're not given that truth. But the people today seem like we just want to flip the paradigm to having a new kind of ruling class that are going to be a little bit lighter in terms of their touch, in terms of, how badly they're going to treat us or control or manipulate us. But that's my biggest concern, that although I might be thinking maybe too short term. That's the thing. When you're living in the moment, maybe we're just too early on in this particular venture we're on, and I'm just chomping at the bit too early. But what are your thoughts on that anyway? Sorry, I just want to know what your thoughts on. Does it not seem like the big dominant voices are kind of being suppressed for the people now that are kind of trying to pick up this mantle, or am I just seeing shit that doesn't actually exist?
Well, I think a lot of it is like litmus tests, right? Like I think that there's so much that goes on in the game in relation to if you stay within a lane, you will be allowed to rise. You will be given those platforms, right? Yeah. But if you are more of an independent, using discernment, and just if you're questioning everybody, there's no room for that. But at the same time, it's like I kind of know it, right? And when we look at what we have now, it's like a lot of my work was spent basically hunting narcissists. Just for some reason, they seem to be the ones that get elevated, so their behavior becomes very predictable, and the different kinds, right? And so what I would say now, it's like there's been articles written, and I think even Jordan Peterson said himself that Justin Trudeau presents as a malignant narcissist, right? Because a lot of the tactics they're using is, the love bombing and what he does in the beginning, the love bombing, everybody loves him, then the devaluing that goes into it, the creating these false realities, right? But now I think we're transitioning into what would be called a covert. I believe that the same tactics, the same tools that will be used by Justin Trudeau. And it's like, who would you rather deal with? A covert narcissist who's very behind the scenes, that manipulates you without you knowing it, as opposed to the brash, I don't care what you think, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. If you get into a circumstance, like whether it's in business or a personal relationship, even family members and stuff, anybody who's watching this that understands narcissism, we are really looking at a potential where we're going to get a covert narcissist next. If there's enough evidence, in my opinion, that the Agenda 2030 was signed by Harper in 2015.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so we see the SDGs, and we've seen the video of Polyev saying, I don't know, I've never read the SDGs. We've seen this on video, right? Sustainable Development Goals, right? The little pin with the rainbow and stuff on it, all of these things that we can see some of the numbers are already in play, right? And he's good at it. Right. And so, and again, I'm going to say Polyev, it's CPCHQ, right? I don't like to say, hey, it's your fault, because that's what a lot of people say. It's, O'Toole wasn't O'Toole was the leader. This is Polyev. No, you're missing the whole Wizard of Oz component of political parties in this country, right? You don't get to see the names. You don't know who these people are that are crafting the narratives, that are the ones calling X and saying, de-amplify this guy. Right. And we know what was happening. I mean, even before Musk, who took over, the guy who was in charge of Twitter Canada was also the former president of the Trudeau Foundation. Jeez, people don't know this. One of the first people that Musk fired was I'll send you a link. I can't remember the name off the top, but he existed, right? And so we have all these games being played, and the scary part is that we don't have that voice. And I don't think that anybody like me or you would ever be even like, I don't want it. I'm an introvert, man. Like I said, like I'm not, I'm feeling like 2025, I've got to come out of my shell, but after this, I'll probably sleep for a couple of hours to recharge my battery. But we have to find just to answer that back, actually, Kris, I don't know if I told you, I think I kind of alluded to it early, but I was in the exact same boat as you. And actually, I think even worse for you, because you're coming across way better. for your first time, man. I don't even the size of the coffee, man.
But that's, hey, even when I started, that was even back during my drinking days, though. So I had at least something to kind of take the edge off. But I was terrible, and I was the same as you. I didn't even used to like get my picture taken.
Yeah.
But my son, and good for him, so proud of him, because as with when raising both my sons, anytime they found any obstacle or barrier they didn't think they could overcome, I'd say, you just got to try, and if you fail or succeed, I guarantee you're going to learn something, and it's going to help improve you. So my son, good on him, when I said I'd love to start this YouTube channel stuff and do what some guys doing, because I got a lot that I got to say. And he said,
Yeah.
well, then just do it. And well, Aaron, I'm no good on camera. Hell, I don't even like getting my picture taken. Anyways, he's the one. It was my son that basically used my own strategy against myself and said, well, hey, take your own advice, right? So I did, and I jumped into it, and I'm kind of glad in a way that I did. But man,
Of course, you gotta be.
I was so awkward as when I started out. But Kris, I got to tell you, based on this conversation so far, like you're head and shoulders above me when I tried doing this stuff. And like I say, just the fact that you're willing to do it, and the things that you put out there on the internet, like it really helps me on my own venture, especially on the online world. I got my personal life that can deal with my personal stuff. Like I have a great family, great life and stuff, but knowing that, the world around me and how crazy it's gotten, it is so nice to know that there are people like you, and there's so many others out there. And that's the one thing I'm super appreciative in terms of all this social media. People talk about social media as being like the worst thing, that happened to humanity. Actually, what as far as I'm concerned, all real social media is it's just a big giant mirror, and it's just showing the ugliness, but a lot of the most beautiful things of humanity too, right? That's what it is. It's just in the absence of social media, right? And based on especially our Canadian culture that goes back to especially the British monarchy, we Canadians were probably really good at putting on a fake front, right? But as soon as you put us behind the keyboard, like you say,
Or back us into a corner, right?
Yeah, maybe we're not as nice as you think we are.
No,
but
no, we're not. But
right,
we don't have
but
those lines, right? They're not
yeah,
as severe, but we do have them. We have
yeah,
boundaries for the
yeah,
most part, right?
yeah. But someone like yourself, like I say, that I've been following for so long, and I watched the post you put out there. It's to me, it really gives me a sense of hope, even on the days that I am pessimistic, which do happen, because I see that. Well, first of all, at least you have a nice sizable audience, and the kind of people. It's not just that I watch your content and see people sharing it, but I read the comments and the replies and stuff, and you have, like, it's not knuckle draggers. You have an audience of really wise, astute, and good people. So that's a
Great
big
people.
factor, right? And
Yeah.
every single one of those people know people in their lives. And so I just think about that degrees of separation, and how even when things are kind of looking a little dim on certain days, well, it's times like this where you can have conversations in real time. Like, you're all the way on the other side of the country. I'm in New Brunswick. You're in BC, right? So we're
Yeah.
like, it's just the simple fact that we can have this conversation in not just audio and video form, but be able to do that, and then have other people watching in real time, and then others that can watch it later after the fact. I feel so happy to know that we at least live in the time where the potential is there, and like I was saying earlier, maybe it's being a little bit too overly cautious about things and thinking about things in the moment. Maybe once we've had some time go by, we'll think about this last 10, 15, 20 years and think, well, even if it took 30 years, what, three decades, let's say, to put humanity on this amazing path or potential path, that's pretty fucking good, right? It took hundreds of years, after the Dark Ages, like when the Roman Empire fell and all this stuff. So, maybe we can kind of fast track this stuff. But to me, the most important thing is having people like you that are doing it and out there talking, people like yourself, people like myself, people like that are not doing it solely for political gain or personal gain. It's really to truly educate and inform and enlighten people so that their minds can be free. Because if their minds are free and they accept freedom and liberty, then I have less that I have to be concerned for myself,
It's
my
a
family,
win
right? It's
for
a win
every
for
seed that you
everybody,
can
right?
plant.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
pulls it back to the base level. I appreciate you saying that. That's why it's like it's interesting because I still don't view myself as an influencer. I never will. Like I know
right,
the people that helped me build the account. I view it more as like a bus. We're all walking together. I do my best to
right.
try and amplify voices. I don't care about the likes and clicks. I don't
Mhm.
do it for money. And at the same time, it's like it's a sense of duty that comes with it. But I'm also inspired by seeing other people, because it's not
Yeah,
easy to be like, you get to the point where it's like, if you're happy all the time, are you really looking? right? You have to, if you don't pull back, if you don't go to 30,000 feet and say, okay, where are we at? What's the likely trajectories we're going to be on? And taking
Yeah, yeah,
the position like you take, as far as, is it going to take 10 years, 20 years, 30 years?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
very similar to what a lot of the lessons I had some mentors in the Indigenous community about the 7 generational thinking, is
Mm-hmm.
that yes, we are not in a good spot. We can understand how we got here to learn about how we want to proceed moving forward, but we
Yeah,
are in the middle of the storm right
right,
now.
right.
Right. And so that's why it's like, when you get up in the morning, is focusing on things. It all comes down to wellness, right? A lot of it is the learning to live again, but also,
Mm,
asking yourself, because again, it's like you get shocked by what happened in 2020. You lose a lot of friends. You have these divisions. You
yeah.
don't. So where's that starting point as far as, okay, how am I going to live moving forward? And then you start to realize, wait a second, this pandemic cleared out a lot of people in my life that did not
Mm,
have my best interest at heart. They
true.
weren't really my friends. So now what makes me happy? What makes
Right.
me feel like I'm contributing in a way?
Mm,
And then you balance it out, right? I started to learn how to cook, to bake, more into nature, more into, but I need to go and do those things so that when I am on Twitter,
yeah.
I'm not, the arrows don't go as deep as they used to. When I
Right.
took the break, when I
Exactly.
came back, it's like I went away, I learned what I needed to, let go what I needed to, but I carry this suit of armor on me
Yeah.
now, as far as what is relevant, what do I take personally, what am I here for, who do I care about on the platform that I want to help promote their content.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I read all the comments, and I'm amazed by some of the things that you see, some of these, and that's kind of what kind of gets me a little bit put off about what's the changes that are happening, as far as, if you're not verified, that you aren't going to be able to engage as much. There are some
Right.
brilliant people that, for whatever
Mm,
reason, they don't want to give their ID over, they can't afford it,
yeah.
they're on a fixed income. There are some brilliant people that are going to be cut out, and I can't do that. I won't do that to my account, because
No.
we are
No, me
literally, I
neither.
don't care whatever socioeconomic background you have, whatever reasons you have for
Yeah.
wanting to be anonymous, none of my
Yep.
business.
Yeah.
If you got
Yeah.
something good to say, if you're going to come out, and that's what I kind of think is
Exactly.
like, I look forward to the end of the Trudeau era, because I think a lot of that is going to be a starting point for that healing, because people have just been brutalized over the last 4 years, wondering, what is Canada? What were we? What have we become? Who
Mm,
are the people that I can trust? Because trust is what's been shattered the most in a lot of in a lot of
yeah.
cases. I didn't trust a lot of people beforehand, but that's just the nature of the game with politics, and just how I've always been. Trust but
Mm,
verify. I'm very
yep.
much, I keep to myself and live in my head 90% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also can't forget that I can't do the work I used to do, as far as getting out there, getting in people's faces, community organizing on that level. But if I can plant a seed that gives you hope, if I can open your mind to thinking that things might not be, it's, again, I'm not trying to scare you. Oh, Polyev isn't. It's no. What I'm saying is, be prepared for more work. We
Mm,
have more work. So heal, make connections, build but I'm encouraging people, again, it's like, don't care about the likes, don't care about the retweets, just keep putting your voice out there. You never
yeah.
know who's going to see it. If you are leaving those seeds behind, whether it's you're planting a seed that you never know where it's going to go. We're talking across country. Are there people in between that are listening to this conversation? We've encouraged thought, we've encouraged dialogue, giving people different perspectives on how to approach things or think
Right.
about things. We're not telling people how to think. It's just being able to have civil discourse. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
if we kept going and for hours and hours, we're going to find things that we don't agree on.
Oh
But
yeah.
does it mean that we're going to yell at each other, or I'm going to mute you, and I'm going to
Well,
no,
well, well,
like, wrap my head around how you're thinking, right?
that to me is the key to the discourse is with someone like yourself, and which is why I think these long form conversations, well, just like in your personal life, right?
Mm.
Anything that's of any substance or importance, you can't summarize that stuff or have a conversation deal with that kind of stuff in 5 minutes. So at the very
180
least,
characters.
yeah, right. At the very least, you do need a little bit of a longer form. And once again, it's not even a matter of whether we disagree. I've never, how crazy would it be for me to ever think that people agree? All we have to agree, and I use this example, I've used it, probably overused it too much over the course of years, but I always use the example is to try to make things simple, to paint a picture for people is just think of if you were going to sit down and play the board game, right? A board game, any board game, I don't care what it is. All really at the end of the day, you can all have all kinds of different perspectives, opinions. But if you're going to play the game, well, you got to all go by the same rules. It's simple as that. Like that's how could it be any more simpler than listen, we all got to follow the same rules. And the minute somebody is skirting or going outside the rules and using that as a means to batter everyone else over the head, we've got an issue, we've got a problem. Basically, that's politics 101. So these
Mhm.
kind of conversations have to take place because it's what gives people the right mindset. When you hear people talk about, you know, especially young people in particular, like free dental care and stuff, listen, I feel terrible for a young person or even older person that might need it. But can we at least give them the honest interpretation of what's taking place? Is yes, what you're doing is you're stealing from people like me and my wife, who we pay for our own private insurance through her work offers a thing, but you have to copay. You pay, they pay some, they pay
Yeah.
some, you pay some, and then we still have to pay out of pocket. I don't know what it is, depending on the procedure, but you have to pay a little bit out of pocket. But we pay for it. And my son, my oldest son, he's in between. He's in another job now, but he doesn't have any coverage, and he's got a really bad toothache. He's using Advil to deal with it. He doesn't have any free. Well, if we can, we'll scrounge up some money and help him if we
Yeah.
can. This was a bad time. But to me, it's like, can we just talk honestly about these stuff? Because when you're using the pretense of benevolence but it's slipping it under the guise of government, which is force. Like that,
Yeah.
we're not having proper conversations if you're putting forth the pretense that you're benevolent in any way when you're doing it by the means of force, which is what government is at the end of the day, right? And that's why the founding fathers of the U.S. and even some of the earlier adopters of Canada and such recognize that we kind of got to keep this thing really, really limited, because look at how fucking terrible it worked out back across the pond over there. It worked out terrible, right? But this is the problem, and I use the terminology quite a bit. A little phrase that I've coined is, clarity of language gives clarity of mind. And to me,
sure.
you are one of those people that is a perfect representation of that, where you articulate your thoughts in a manner that doesn't leave people in a position where they can misconstrue. If you're really, really an ideologue, I'm sure you could find anything.
And you can clip a 6-second here.
Right. But most reasonable people, when I read your content, when I see your stuff, most reasonable people, as far as I'm concerned, would look at that and like, this is a guy that's given honest, good faith arguments and presenting his information in a not just articulate manner, but in a manner that you can tell it's not just virtue signaling. It's just, and that's the thing about libertarians. I'll even admit, of course, I'm selfish in terms of I want the country to be free, mostly for me and my family. Mostly.
but if you have that, then others do too, right? So it's like, yeah,
exactly. But that's the beautiful thing. It's not a zero-sum game. It's as old as any market transaction. Is if you want that and I want that and we both get it and we both walk away from it, well, that's a win-win situation. That's what liberty does at the end of the day. And
should be a starting point for it, right?
Right. That should be the starting point. And that's, like I say, that's the kind of stuff, that's the kind of discourse, that's the kind of engagement that I really like. Once again, I'm like you. I even back years ago, I could have jumped into the fray, but I felt like I would have been a little bit dirty of starting to use some really popular channels at the time to kind of go on to. I kind of always wanted to see if I could just do things on my own. I'm a little bit independent that way. maybe to my own self-detriment. Probably. But the biggest thing to me is I had to at least, I want people to know that I'm trying to be honest and forthright and at least to gain your trust, and not as a means to sell you anything, but just because like I say, like we have a granddaughter on her. Well, she's here now, but she's going to be growing up. I want the world that she grows up to be conducive to being peaceful and prosperous as best you can. I'm not a utopian. I know things are never going to be perfect, but I think all human beings at the end of the day, well, not all, maybe the few psychopaths and sociopaths, but most human beings at the end of the day, I think when you talk to them individually, want the same thing that you or I want. So why the hell do we have to keep putting up with all these sophists and central planners and propagandists to keep manipulating us to the point where we're not constantly discouraged, disenfranchised, and divided? That's not the place where we want to be. And people like you have done a great job in terms and trying to turn that around. And like I said, Kris, I'm so grateful for you for doing that. And I hope you'll keep doing that and even come out of your little shell a little bit more or whatever. Because like I say, it's not like you're doing a bad job in terms of doing the verbal stuff too. So
I'm on the broadcast next Monday. I'm sticking to it. I think it'll get easier. Like I've done a few, but I get, that's why I put that post out. Cause it's like, what am I doing? What am I not doing? And where is my heart? And I think a lot of, most of us, I think the game, your whole life, to a degree, you're going to feel misunderstood.
Yeah.
Right. And so go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make sure, because like I say, I've kind of been thinking about the things that I kind of want to cover, but I want to know too, is there anything, because I've kind of been, as the interviewer, I guess, can kind of been leading the conversation, but I genuinely want to just know anything, like I say, we're at about 1:42. So if you want, tie it up by like 2 hours or so. But if there's anything before then that you personally, that's something that's really on your chest that you want to say or talk about or do anything, like I say, I'm just more than willing, because I really genuinely enjoy hearing other people's perspectives and opinions and interpretation in terms of the world around them. So was there anything in particular? I know we kind of touched down on the COVID, we touched a little bit on the immigration thing, the somewhat of the Great Reset. We touched on lots of politics, the voting process, Trudeau, the Conservatives. So we touched on some pretty good subject matter. But is there anything that I've missed or overlooked that's something that maybe is more pressing you that you wanted to kind of bring up?
I think we've covered most of it. I think that, it's for me, the biggest thing has been last year, like I did for a few times, I created wellness spaces. I think a lot of where my heart is it comes back. I mentioned this a few times, but I know a ton of people are suffering out there, and what we don't, for me, it's like I've been trained over the years. I've been in rooms filled with trauma, and at the same time, it's not like I didn't go through, what COVID with what went on there. It's not like I didn't experience trauma, but I cannot in any way suggest that what I experienced was comparable to what a lot of Canadians experienced. Yeah. And so what I've tried to do is empathize with different circumstances, for whatever reason, however you got here. Based on the policies when they rip through our society, is you have to have that courage to restart.
Yeah.
Right. You have to accept the fact the world has changed. There's no going back, but you are being provided an opportunity now to understand yourself and to understand how you can contribute in this. Right. Yes. And I remember a lot of times it's like I've been lucky enough to have a few mentors in my life that just popped in conveniently when the universe was very kind to me. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
And I can remember it's like, first of all, you have to choose to be you're not a victim unless you want one, unless you accept yourself as being a victim. Right. That is a huge thing. If you can be victimized, but are you a victim? No. You can make that decision of okay, no, I'm not letting you inside. I'm not letting you demoralize me. I'm not going to question why you did what you did, but I am going to learn from it, and I'm going to transition into a new path with this new knowledge so that I can do my best to try and avoid being hurt again in that way. Right. And at the same time, it's the restart is where I think that they are counting on a lot of people to stay in that state of paralysis because the dissonance is so large, the fear, there's so many different emotional triggers that are being pulled, right? And I'm not a psychologist, but I have my counseling ticket and other things. So I've experienced a lot of different mechanisms where people are coming from a very dark place and walked with them to get them to a place where they're empowered. I never tell people what to do. What works for me might not work for you, but it's having that courage to say no. Right. This is I'm going to take a look at things as a starting point. And I point to Trudeau and saying, OK, when he's gone, the healing can begin. But for those of you that are watching now that haven't started that journey, everyone's going to walk it. Everyone has to walk it in order to make it through this marathon. It's a healing process is going to be continuous through this. And as hard as it might be, because everyone's circumstances are different, making sure you find that time to do things that allow you to defrag your brain, doing things that make you feel happy. Listen to old music. Like these are things that I did. I learned how to bake, and again, all of a sudden I'm fond of 80s movies again. Not that I'm binging on them, but it's like, reminding myself of what it means to be happy even through this. Because make no mistake, their number one tool is demoralization. They want you to think you are not worth anything, that there's nothing you can do. And the most powerful thing you can do is smile. Is to say you're not going to get inside.
It's so damn effective too. That's the part that disgusts me, is how effective that is. And I think of actually, you brought up the First Nations a couple times, people, and I drove for a local cement mixing company. Actually, same guy that owns the company I work for now in town. I drive for I pave roads, people. Actually, I really do. I genuinely. Anyways, but it's a private company. But anyways, it was a concrete company, and I remember. And this is kind of one of the sad stains on Canada's history. In terms of racism towards black or brown people, I never really witnessed much of that. But the one prejudice that I did witness growing up, especially on the East Coast in particular here, not as much in Ontario where I grew up in the East End of Toronto, but I definitely seen a lot of the racism or prejudice towards the First Nation people. And I also seen a lot of that victim mentality. Now, when I drove for this company, Nobody wanted, anytime there was a job to be pouring a basement or a floor or a slab in the First Nation community, oh, I don't want to go, like I'd be like, I'll go. Because I don't care. I just treat people like my initial thing is I treat you as good as I want to be treated. If you treat me like shit, you're getting it back. If you treat me good, we're fine. We're good. We're golden, right?
Yeah.
So I just do my thing. I'm confident. I'm not worried about people. I can handle myself, so I don't get worried about things. But every example, and this was another perfect one where it's like you deal with people at the one-on-one, talk to the guys, man. Now, not like I could do it. I'm driving at the time. Hey man, you want a beer? Like, these people treated me with absolute respect, dignity. I had no issues with any one of these workers. But there was that preconceived notion or that prejudice that was permeating through in that particular workplace that prevented other people from getting that reality that I got to get. And that's the part that I think is most disgusting. Not just that the prejudice that keeps you away from other people that might be the very best person, might be someone that could end up being maybe a best friend someday, who knows. But the other thing that really I find so demoralizing, and my background is actually Scottish and Irish. On my mother's side it's Scottish, on my dad's side it's Irish. But man, what I reject outright any pretense that I would ever use the fact that the Irish heritage was oppressed. Well, even the Scottish, I mean, come on, William Wallace, right? Both sides of my family were greatly, massively oppressed by the British monarch at the time for centuries. Am I going to pretend that somehow has a direct correlation or effect on my life as it is today? No. I mean, I'm sure if I wanted to scour everything possible, I could find some way to trick my mind into believing that I'm a victim because of something that happened hundreds of years ago. But in reality, I realized that, man, that's actually, you know what? The only person I'm harming by doing that is my fucking self, because I got to live up here in this head. And I sure as hell don't want to live in that kind of state of mind where I perceive of myself as a perpetual victim, nor would I want to ever replicate that or show that to my kids. My God, the last thing I would want to see for them to believe that. And we've all been through trials and tribulations, and forget about your race or your culture. But once again, to me, the big thing is that victim mentality. I wish, and this is an area where I've tried in the past, but because there was so much hostility at the time, I actually genuinely like to reach out to, whether it's, people that perceive themselves as in some identifiable oppressed or victim group, so I can kind of show and speak with some of that kind of similar understanding of how people can treat each other badly, but how detrimental that is to your own mindset. And for you to raise, and I've been into these communities, and even though those people, those construction workers, those First Nations guys that were working there, we treated each other with dignity and respect. It doesn't take much to look around that area and see what the victim culture, what the victim narrative does to the society as at large. At the individual level, there's some great people, but at that macro level, what it does to those communities, I think, is just absolutely freaking disgusting. I think it's vile. I don't even think there should be such thing, as far as I'm concerned, as these reserves. Why can't they just be treated like a human? Like, why can't we all just be Canadian? What the hell is wrong with that, or whatever you want? But yeah,
we found something we disagree on, but I'm not 100% disagreeing.
No, good. No, that's okay. That's fine though, because I'm sure whatever you've got to bring to the
table.
But
I fully understand and respect and appreciate your position on that.
Okay.
I'll be quick with this one, just with my with my experience. There's over 650 First Nations in Canada. In BC, there's around, I think, 202 or 205. I worked with approximately 51. And that work can be anything from helping get grant money to helping preserve language to the political side of things. More on the hereditary chief side, as opposed to the INAC chiefs that are again, it's not as this is something we could spend probably a couple hours on going through. But what I will say is that you're absolutely correct, because there are First Nations in this country, in this province, that that you can clearly see they still have pride in their culture. They're working within the system. The humor is amazing. Some might call it racist, but at the same time, they're not looking to. It's not racist as wanting revenge. It's like, this is what happened to us. You did your best. We're still here. Go F yourself. We are building things. We are not, but we're not holding ourselves back in the mental prison that you will see some of the other. Because again, it's like a lot of our system that we see here today with the corruption. We've got a very few people that are controlling a lot of things. People don't understand that the First Nations, it's the same thing. The
Yeah.
government
Oh yeah.
gets the chiefs.
Oh
There's
yeah.
so much bullshit that goes
Big
on there,
time.
man, that
Same shit,
90%
every
of the
pile.
people are being screwed over by the
Oh yeah.
10%. And
Oh
so
yeah.
there's never, so these stereotypes come from that, whether it's addiction, whether it's like most
Yeah.
people don't even realize that if you're First Nations and you're on your reserve, you can't even own a home. The Indian Act
Yeah.
prevents you from actually owning a home. So you wonder
Yeah.
why every 10 years
Yeah.
they're knocking them down, because there's no pride in that. They can't own anything. So
Exactly.
why are they going to? And then all the families move in. We can talk about housing
Yep.
lists and how those are manipulated. Not every
Yep.
First Nation. There are
Yep.
some
Yep.
out there that are a really good example, but there's also some that are stuck in a third world. And a lot of that is that victim mentality where there's such few resources. And most people don't even realize it's like when they created it, they would create the reserves, and there's different languages for different, you know, some of the, we have autonomy as far as some treaties were not really put in place in BC. So you have the Chilcote, you got Haida Gwaii. These are like actual, you know, things that have come to be where they have the sovereignty to a degree, right? Maybe not necessarily over everything, but they still have more control over what happens, right? But you have those that are stuck in a perpetual loop where, for any given First Nation, as an example, when colonization occurred, they drew a line, a circle, and in that circle, there's 15 different families. One chief. So they all compete. Right? Some are more politically active. Some are more on the traditional side. They're not politics, but they're into the herbalism. They're into preserving the culture and arts and these kinds of things, right? And so of the 15, you might have 5 that are politically active, right? Those 5 families fight. Constantly fight. And so this chief will get in and they'll be like, okay, we want to do something. We want to do something for development. We want to encourage jobs. Well, wait a second. Are you just going to employ your family?
Yeah.
Well, we can't have that, right? So there's no certainty. And most people don't understand there's so many little things that go on the First Nations land that aren't talked about. And it's that perpetual divide and conquer that is presented to you by the monarchy through the Indian Act. There's so much that needs to be, and most Canadians don't understand the complexities of it. But I will tell you this: of the 51 First Nations that I was a part of, I never, you know, again, I do have Musqueam blood, like I have Irish, Scottish, Norwegian, American, and I have some Indigenous. But I'm not saying, oh, I'm Native. I won't do that, right?
Yeah, you're not doing the Pocahontas thing.
No.
You're not doing Elizabeth Warren.
Right, exactly. But I will say, you know, I have a lot of respect, and I did my time to immerse myself in the culture, to understand it, to understand the differences and the similarities. And at the end of the day, there's very few like real differences outside of the inability to communicate. You know, as a lot of the work was, okay, a politician doesn't, you know, they want support and they don't know how to reach out. There's very little trust on the other side as far as that goes. So I just said, okay, I'll make the call. No, I'm not guaranteeing you a photo op. Is this genuine or is this politics? Like, do you want to actually help? You want to build relationships, or are we going to play the political games? Because if you're asking me to do that, no, I'm not going to go and set up a photo op so that you can get your tweet out there that makes you look like you have this relationship. If you're genuine, it has to happen, not just when we're leading up to an election, right? So I can make those introductions and then I back away. But I'm telling you, the sense of humor, the pride in culture, the wanting the 7-generational mentality. There's so many, like, there's people need to understand. I think the best point to take away, there's a huge difference between the INAC chiefs that are paid band council and the hereditary people that have the 7-generational mentality. They understand what's here today. They want to build a better future. Of course, they don't want to lose their culture. They don't want to lose their language. They don't want to lose their arts, right? But the disconnect where, and the monarchy's been very successful, right? Because a lot of people, all they see is First Nations that are homeless and alcoholism and suicides and all these other things. It's like, well, have we looked at causation? Like, why are these things happening? Do you not think that the average First Nations person wants opportunity, wants their family to be safe? They want to live off their own land. They want to have that pride in culture and not be judged for it. But most people don't understand. It's like, I may want the pipeline to go through because I understand that carting oil by rail is far more dangerous as far as having the, you know, there's again, I'm not saying I'm one way or another, but I do believe that there's so many arguments that are just, again, you get the harsh, you get this opinion, you get that opinion, and everybody in the middle is like, what happened? Like, we were going to have opportunity, but now we have this political.
I'm not even sure what our disagreement was. I was waiting for you to.
When he said, "Why can't they become Canadian?" Because that's like, again, it's like they want to live. Yeah, that was it.
Well, I guess I used the wrong. What I should have said is, it just doesn't make no sense to me that you have to put these people in, just you're only allowed in this particular jurisdiction, and
Right.
like, it's just, can we just treat each other as human beings? And what I've actually tested this out with some First Nation people that I've worked with, or other contractor stuff, just to see what kind of reaction I would get off them. And actually, believe it or not, I've usually, they're fairly young in the construction. Like, most of the guys I've run around like 30 or 40 years or so. I guess not super young, but they actually, I brought this up where I was like, yeah, I'm like, first of all, I'm no fan of a monarchy. I don't believe that any king or queen gets to claim an entire continent or an entire this. I said, but to tell you the truth, I don't think there's any such thing as any like First Nations chief that says, "Oh, I get to own all." Like, to me, it's the same thing. I don't. It to me,
Yeah.
I just think we're human beings. At the end of the day, we have to live somewhere, right? Even the state of nature, like, every animal has to have its law, its place, right? So to me, is that, and that's the beautiful thing about the philosophy of liberty and some of those Christian values, is really, at the end of the day, or even if it's some other whatever their culture values, is if we share the same thing as, you do you, I do me. I don't
Yeah.
force my stuff on you. You don't force your stuff on me. We trade, then I don't
Yeah.
really care. To me, at the end of the day, that's to me, that's what unity is all about, is acknowledging the fact that the one thing that we share in common as humans is that we all have that, we have that rational self-interest, right?
Yeah.
We want to care for other people because we are definitely social creatures, but we have that rational self-interest. And if we can rely on that for the most part, and accept the fact that there's always going to be exceptions and outliers and threats to our livelihood, we're all much better off if we have that at least baseline understanding in how we treat and deal with each other in society, socially, economically. I think we're much better off and much better prepared, and much better situated to deal with any external or internal threats when we're not constantly perceiving each other. That's the thing. When there's a boogeyman around every corner, right, it's going to be really, really difficult for you to actually perceive when the boogeyman actually does come, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the problem. So as a white man, I don't want to have to worry about First Nation people, because I'm constantly told all the time that there's this collective called First Nation people, and they're all just like the Borg, apparently. They're all just seemingly hate me because of the color of my skin. Like I said, I've
Not true.
never witnessed that in my actual physical life in
Yeah.
the real world yet, not one time. So to me, that's not really correlating with reality. To me, that tells me that there's people that are nefarious actors that are doing that for a reason, and it's the reason why is
Exactly.
because it's been known for centuries that divide and conquer works like a charm.
Exactly. And I will
Yeah,
say, like, the 90%, again, it's what they count on, the 10% count on the 90% not figuring that out, right? But I will say this for sure. It
yeah,
makes no difference if you're a chief or you're a politician. They
right.
both get the same look on their face when you lay out a nice chart to show the amount
Yeah,
of damage they're causing based on this agenda, this, you know what I mean? Like the lack of
mhm,
disclosure when it comes to all of the games, the quid pro quo nepotistic world that we face. Right,
mhm,
corruption is corruption. It does not matter what skin color you have. That divide and conquer. Well, you can say it does come from I mean, again, it's like, it's not coming from a specific race or anything per se. It's just the mentality of the elites that think that they're better than us, that think that we are useless eaters,
yeah,
right? And I'm of the opinion, no, we're not, and we're
no,
still here, and we're going to keep fighting through this, right?
yeah,
And so the
yeah,
more we can overcome those divides, the better. And it is all through understanding, right? They don't want us to understand the other side, because if you
yeah,
do, where's our commonalities? What they want is us. Where is it that we can drive a wedge between you and you? Because we can't
mhm,
have you figuring out that you do agree on 95% of things. It's that
yeah,
5% that they want us focused on. And if we
mhm,
can, it's like I see, it says true liberty requires evolution, not revolution, which is
yeah,
perfect. We have to
yeah,
evolve as a species to realize
yeah.
it's okay to disagree on certain
That's right.
things,
That's right. That's
but
right.
where do we agree? And let's walk together on that.
Yeah,
And you'd be amazed at what we could accomplish if everyone wasn't slamming doors on people, because you got to be at 100%. You got to conform.
yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah,
we can't work together on anything. And they've been very successful. So it's not like a thousands of years they're using the same
yeah,
bloody tools. The books are right there. We just got to read them. But I mean, and if
yeah,
I can suggest readings, everyone read Prince,
yeah.
Machiavelli. Everyone read Sun
Oh, yeah,
Tzu, The Art of War. If you
got it,
really
got it.
want a dark read is The Grand Chessboard by Brzezinski. I'm not a fan,
Okay.
but it's good to
Yeah, yeah,
read all
yeah, yeah,
pieces out there. And again, anything Ayn Rand, I saw your post earlier about the
yeah,
minority. You know, there are so many people out there that can give you what you right, exactly. Saw in the background there. There are don't let people tell you what to think. And if you don't
No.
feel like a lot of people have forgotten what intuition is, have
Yeah.
forgotten what principles are, don't know what their values are,
Yeah.
where are those lines. And there's a quote by RFK, it's like every time you comply you get weaker. And I
Right.
agree with that. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
just come down to, oh, complying, I'm going to line up and get back. No, when you are complying with staying silent on something, you are
Mm-hmm.
getting weaker. You are letting other people dictate what you are to think, how you are to react to that. And so you're giving power to people that, first of all, I don't do it. I just don't do that, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it's a never thing. I respect people. That's absolute. You know, you can respect people's opinions. There's not
Mm.
a single person on the planet I agree 100% with, nor
Yeah.
should there be. Like
Right.
that's like just an inherent knowledge, right? But there
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
people out there that are so they're followers that don't even realize they're leaders because they
Right.
haven't taken the time to look at themselves, to see
True.
what makes them happy, what matters to them, how can they
Yeah.
evolve in that
Yeah.
sense into becoming. I was never like people view me as a leader, and it's like, was I always that way? Do I view myself as a leader? No, I walk
Mhm.
with people. If you know what I mean. Anytime I've been in a position of leadership, most people
Yeah.
don't know I'm in the position of leadership until something goes down. It's like
Yeah.
if there's a
Yeah.
problem, I'll deal with it, but we're walking together eye to eye. We've all
Right.
got responsibilities. I'm just, okay, I'm out front. I've got a certain skill set. I'll handle
Yeah.
it. You just keep doing what you're doing and let's walk together through this. And right now,
Yeah.
people are looking to elevate, to put people on perches, not realizing that if they just stand up, if they look in the mirror, say that I'm capable of more, I'm going to do more, you will not demoralize me. Get
Mm.
active. Start doing that introspective work so you understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
You're going to be better for it regardless of whether Agenda 2030 comes to fruition or all these
Yeah.
other things you can't control in your life come to
Exactly.
fruition. It's like if you sit there and you wait for things to happen to you, they might happen to you or they might not. And the thing about that is you can't get that time back. So you might
Yeah.
as well put the time in to be able to understand yourself. And that's why I think that as much as like if there's a silver lining with anything that's happened over the last 4 years, had it not happened, I wouldn't have even done that. I would still be living through other people. I would still be going up and down the whiteboards and, forgetting that there's more to life out
Mm.
there. And we live in a beautiful country. We live on a
Yeah.
beautiful planet. There's
Yeah.
lots of things out there. The reintegrating with people is a bit difficult because it's I
Yeah.
remember the looks in people's eyes when I wasn't wearing a mask, but it
Yeah.
starts to soften. We can't forget, but we also can't stop living in the process, waiting for other people, giving power to other people to fix things that you may never see come to fruition, right? And
Yeah.
if there's anything we know, man, time is the number one currency on this planet, and
It
I don't
is.
intend to waste any of it. Hence,
Mm.
2025. Thank you for having me on your show. I
Oh,
feel
always.
like
Well, I tell you, listening to you, even just how you're kind of summarizing things there now, it actually makes me think, and it just solidifies and reinforces the fact that at the end of the day, really, the antidote to all this madness is to break out of that collectivist mindset. Once again, get to the fact where we're perceiving each other as the individuals, the unique individuals we are. We're not just the mere representation of our skin color or what's between our legs or any of that stuff. And that's what I found has worked best for me. Just break out of your comfort zone, get out there and just go talk to someone that maybe if you're, a brown person and you've been told all these white people are racist towards you, maybe just if you're at the coffee shop, maybe sit down and have a chat with a guy just to see how, and you'll find, I think most people will find quickly is, yep, most of your concerns will be alleviated pretty quickly because once again, humans, and I've read those books and I've read the other ones too. We all have the ability to be good. We all have the ability to be bad. But even if you're absent, so my wife's an atheist. I come from a Christian background. But at the end of
right
the
on.
day, yeah, seriously, it's wild actually. And our kids were raised. I never told my kids that they had to go to church. My wife never, promoted atheism. Neither of them would ever say that they're necessarily religious today, but they're very, I would say, kind of spiritual in nature, and
Yeah,
they have that morality instilled with them because to me, it's the message, it's the stories, it's the narrative that resonates with the person. It doesn't matter who or how it come about. It's
right.
the messaging. And like I say, when I think about all of the things that people have today, or sorry, where I was going with it is it's the individual. Just deal with each other as the individual. And I think that is truly the antidote. And break free, break out of your little echo chambers. Try it once in a while. I'm not even suggesting to maybe do that, you're dipping your toes in the water, maybe online, because that is the one area, once again, the discourse has been heightened to be so divisive, and there's algorithms that work to help push that kind of stuff. But even if you're just doing it in your personal life, like I say, just even like I say, even at the local coffee shop or somewhere, just do that in your life so that you can get your mindset back into perceiving each other as the individuals we are, because that's the recipe going forward for us to put all this stuff in the past, or at least the ones who are going to steer things. Let's admit this too. All of Canada is not going to steer the direction of the boat, right? A lot of them will just follow whichever way it goes, right? So for those of us who actually do want to have any sway or influence in the direction of this country, make sure you're lead by example, right? This is, to me, that if you want it to resonate with people, you have to lead by example. You can't be a walking, talking contradiction, and you have to be willing to put aside your overly cautious or cares and concerns of talking or dealing with other people. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I'm literally lead by example, and not just by talking to Kris, but by putting it out there. And I'll put it out there in this live stream right now. If you want to engage in any kind of discussion, discourse, I don't care if you disagree with me vehemently, just know that I'm going to come at the conversation or the debate or the dialogue with honest, good faith arguments. I'm going to be looking to not just talk to you, but I'm also perceptive and aware of the fact there's an audience watching it, and I'm trying to speak to them as well. And to me, the most important thing for me is to make sure that I'm being consistent in what I have to say and how I present myself, so that other people can kind of do that for themselves. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's how humanity has always advanced herself or evolved herself going forward, is we had to break free from some old paradigms and adopt some new ones. And if you're unwilling to do that, here's another thing that I would offer for advice. There are some people who just don't have that kind of courage or of their convictions. Then maybe don't be the one that's too boisterous and trying to suppress or drown out the voices of people who do have the courage. If you're just going to enter into a conversation or a dialogue or debate, whether it's online or in life, to stir up division or anxiety, then I would just say step aside, go allow other people, allow the people that have the proper voices and know how to articulate their thoughts. Right. That's not an elitist mindset. That's just a matter of understanding how competence works. And yes, humans have to function off competence, but you just have to be willing to at least stay in your lane, because at the end of the day, I'm the same way. Listen, if there's people, and there are many people that are vastly superior at doing things than I am, and I yield to their authority in the things that they do in terms of not our authority in terms of controlling me, but the fact that they have the competence and the skills to do what they need to do. And I will do whatever I can to help raise and elevate them, because I recognize and that benefits me too. Right. That there is a situation where it truly does, the ocean does raise all boats, but it has to be by sheer, not just competence, but by people to prove things that are objectively true and based on, actual ethics and morality that is consistent with what it is to be a flourishing free human being. Let that kind of stuff take place. And if you want to enter in it, by all means do it. Do things like what Kris is doing and put your best voice forward, but at least be a participant in some way so that we can be that counterbalance. Because there's a lot of people out there right now who are literally doing everything they can to silence and suppress us. But if we can come together and overwhelm them and be the ones that have our voices. Well, I don't want to silence anyone. I just want to be able to offer my ideas, because I believe that the ideas are not necessarily my ideas, but the ideas I've adopted from a lot of other people who have come before me and maybe tweaked in some way in my own. But I'm really appreciative of all the geniuses in the past that have helped me get to the point where I'm at. And I'm hopefully that I can contribute. I'm not saying I'm a genius, but hopefully I can contribute in some way to make that continue on and going forward. And Kris is going to, I know for a fact, you're going to continue to do that. But anyways, Kris, I know we've kind of been kind of going on for a little while now. I've been trying to keep my live streams to about 2 hours. We're about 2 hours and 11 minutes. And I really, really appreciate you coming on the show and taking your time to articulate your thoughts. And like I said, I'm really, really positive and feeling upbeat today by that fact. I don't know if it'll be the same way tomorrow.
Moment by moment, man. Right?
Once again, thanks, man, for coming on to this show. And like I say, if there's any last final thoughts or anything you just want to say before we tie it up, and then you can get back to your day, and we'll talk again at some other point in time going forward.
Perfect. No, just thanks for having me, man, and keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, if you want to have me back, just send me a DM, and I look forward to watching what you guys do, what you're doing, and what you have coming up for sure.
For
Yeah,
sure, right on.
just keep your head up, man, back straight, and keep
Nice.
smiling if you can.
I will. Well, thank you very much. And like I say, if you anytime you ever want to, if there's something that's on your mind and you want to use my channel for any particular reason or to have a conversation, I'm always willing to. And same with anyone out there that's watched this show. I see there's quite a few comments in there. Sorry that I didn't get to the comments there, folks. As you know, usually when I'm engaged in deep dialogue, I try to keep it on track and not interrupt it too much as possible. But actually, I want to let Kris get back to doing his thing. So maybe we'll just leave the comments for today. I do appreciate all you folks that did join into the stream. I'm sure you'll be looking forward to sharing with us some other people that might be able to watch it later. But anyways, Kris, thanks, man, for coming on the show. We'll talk to you another time soon. And this is Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.